During Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter's father-in-law threw red wine in her face. Her husband, my own son-in-law, laughed and said, "Thanks, Dad. Maybe that will teach her some respect." I felt my hands grip the chair until the wood groaned under my fingers. The entire room went silent, waiting for the poor old black man in the cheap suit to lower his head and accept the humiliation. They expected me to beg. They expected me to cry. Instead, I stood up and walked out without saying a word. I walked to my rusted pickup truck, picked up my secure phone, and made one call. They had no idea that the man they just kicked out owned the bank that held the mortgage on their mansion. They had no idea who they were dealing with. My name is Ulysses Mercer. I am 68 years old. To the world, I am just a retired factory worker living on a pension, driving a truck that has seen better days. I wear suits that are out of style, and I live in a small cabin in the woods. But that is a mask, a carefully crafted disguise I have worn since my wife Esther passed away. In my past life, I was a fixer for multinational corporations. I cleaned up messes that governments did not want to touch. I accumulated wealth that these people could not even dream of. But I promised Esther I would live a quiet life. I promised her I would put down the sword. Tonight, however, the Pembroke family forced me to pick it back up. Before I continue this story, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who mistook your kindness for weakness. The air inside the Pembroke estate was stifling. It was not the heat from the fireplace, it was the weight of judgment. This was the first Thanksgiving since my daughter Gabrielle married Bryce Pembroke. I had been against the marriage from the start, but I loved my daughter, so I kept my mouth shut. The Pembroke family is what they call old money in this town. They have a crest on their gate, they have portraits of ancestors on the walls who probably owned people who looked like me. And tonight, they made sure I knew my place. I sat at the far end of the long mahogany table. I was the only black face in a sea of pale skin and expensive pearls. I could hear the whispers. They did not even try to hide them. Bryce's aunt, a woman with too much makeup and too little kindness, leaned over to her neighbor and whispered loud enough for me to hear. "Look at his suit. It smells like mothballs. Does he not have anything better to wear for a formal dinner?" I ignored her. I focused on my plate. I had learned a long time ago that lions do not concern themselves with the opinions of sheep. But it was hard to ignore the way they looked at Gabrielle, my daughter. My beautiful, brilliant Gabrielle, who had graduated top of her class, who ran a non-profit organization. In this house, she was nothing but a servant. Leland Pembroke sat at the head of the table. He was a man of 65 with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He held the carving knife like a weapon. He looked down the table at the turkey Gabrielle had spent 6 hours roasting. She had used Esther's secret recipe. The smell of sage and butter filled the room, but on Leland's face, there was only disgust. So Leland said, his voice booming across the crystal glassware, "This is what you people call a turkey." Gabrielle smiled nervously. Her hands were trembling slightly as she adjusted her napkin. "Yes, Leland, it is a heritage breed. I brined it for 24 hours, just like my mother used to." Leland poked the meat with his fork. He did not take a bite. He just poked it like it was roadkill. "It looks dry." "And what is this stuffing? It looks like mush. Did you buy the bread at a discount store?" The table erupted in polite snickers. Bryce, who was sitting next to his father, swirled his wine glass and chuckled. "Come on, Dad, give her a break. You know Gabrielle likes to save money. Old habits die hard, right, honey?" He looked at Gabrielle with a smirk. He was mocking her upbringing. He was mocking the life I had given her. I felt a muscle in my jaw jump. I looked at Bryce. This was the man who had promised to protect her, and here he was joining in the stone throwing. Gabrielle's face flushed. She tried to maintain her dignity. "Bryce, please. I bought the ingredients at Whole Foods. It is a traditional recipe." "Traditional," Leland sneered. "Traditional for whom?" "For people who eat with their hands. In this house, Gabrielle, we have standards. We do not eat peasant food." That was the line. He did not say the racial slur, but it hung in the air, heavy and ugly. Peasant. He meant us. He meant me. Gabrielle put her fork down. The sound of metal hitting china was sharp. "Leland, that is unfair. I worked hard on this dinner. If you do not like it, you do not have to eat it. But you will not insult my family's traditions." The room went deadly silent. No one spoke back to Leland Pembroke, especially not the girl from the other side of the tracks. Leland's face turned a deep shade of red. He stood up slowly. He picked up his glass of expensive vintage Cabernet. He looked at the wine, then he looked at my daughter. "You think you have the right to speak back to me in my own house," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You think because my son was foolish enough to marry you that you are one of us. You are nothing. You are a lucky little charity case, and you need to be reminded of your place." Then it happened. In slow motion, I watched his hand move. I watched the dark red liquid arc through the air. It splashed across Gabrielle's face. It soaked into her white silk blouse. It dripped down her chin like blood. Gabrielle gasped. She froze, eyes wide in shock. The wine burned her eyes. She sat there, stunned, unable to move. For a second, there was absolute silence. Then a sound broke the tension. Laughter. It was Bryce, my son-in-law. He was laughing. He clapped his father on the shoulder. "Thanks, Dad," he said, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. God, she looked like a drowned rat. Maybe that will teach her some respect. Maybe now she will learn to shut her mouth and listen to her betters. The rest of the family joined in. The aunt laughed. The cousins laughed. It was a chorus of cruelty. I felt the demon inside me wake up, the demon I had buried when I married Esther, the part of me that knew how to dismantle a man's life in 10 seconds. My hands gripped the edge of the table. The wood creaked. I could feel the grain splitting under my fingertips. I wanted to vault across the table. I wanted to grab Leland by his silk tie and smash his face into the mashed potatoes. I wanted to break Bryce's laughing jaw. But I did not, because violence would only prove them right. Violence would make me the savage they thought I was. And I had a weapon far more dangerous than my fists. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. The laughter died down slightly. They looked at me. Leland wiped his hand on a napkin, looking at me with pure contempt. "Sit down," Ulysses Leland barked. "Or get out. Honestly, I do not know why we invited you. You depress the atmosphere. Look at you. You look like you are about to ask for a handout." I walked over to Gabrielle. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. I gently wiped the wine from her cheek. She was shaking. She looked up at me and I saw the shame in her eyes. Not shame for herself, but shame that I had to witness this. "Come on, baby girl," I said, my voice steady. "We are leaving." Gabrielle started to stand, but Bryce grabbed her arm. "She is not going anywhere," he hissed. "She has to clean up this mess. Look at the tablecloth. That is imported linen. She is going to wash it by hand before she sleeps." I looked at Bryce's hand on my daughter's arm. I looked him dead in the eye. "Let her go, Bryce." Bryce laughed again, but this time it was nervous. "Or what, old man? You going to hit me? You going to break a hip? Get out of my house. Go back to your shack. Leave the civilized people alone." He shoved me. It was a weak shove, but it was enough. I nodded. Just once. I turned to Gabrielle. "I will see you soon, honey. Stay strong." I turned my back on them. As I walked to the door, I heard Leland call out, "Don't steal any silverware on your way out, Ulysses." I walked out into the cold November night. The air was crisp. My old Ford pickup was parked next to their lineup of Mercedes and BMWs. It looked out of place, just like me. I climbed into the truck. The leather seat was cold. I sat there for a moment listening to the silence of the night. My heart was not racing. My breathing was calm. That is the thing about true rage. It is not hot. It is cold. It is absolute zero. I reached under the dashboard and pulled out a small black case. Inside was a phone. Not the smartphone I carried for show. This was a satellite-encrypted device, a remnant of my old life. I dialed a number I had not called in 5 years. It rang once. Mercer, a female voice answered. Crisp, professional. Sloan, my former second-in-command, the shark who managed my hidden empire. I watched the lights of the Pembroke mansion through my windshield. I could see the shadows of them moving around in the dining room. They were probably toasting to their victory. They were probably drinking more of that expensive wine. "Sloan," I said. "I am here, sir," she replied. "I saw the alert on the biometric monitor. Your heart rate spiked. Are you in danger?" "No," I said. "But someone else is. I want you to execute Protocol Omega." There was a pause on the line. A heavy pause. Sloan knew what that meant. Protocol Omega was the nuclear option. It was total financial annihilation. "Sir," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "Protocol Omega is designed for hostile corporate takeovers of enemy states. Are you sure?" I looked at the window where my daughter was being forced to scrub a tablecloth while her husband laughed. "I have never been more sure in my life," I said. "Target?" Sloan asked. Pembroke Real Estate Holdings, I said. And every subsidiary connected to Leland and Bryce Pembroke. Understood, Sloan said. I am accessing the mainframe now. Sir, looking at their financials, they are highly leveraged. They have a balloon payment due on their commercial loans next week. The bank was about to extend it. Buy the debt, I said. Buy all of it, every cent. I want to own the mortgage on their office tower. I want to own the lease on their company cars. I want to own the deed to the house I'm looking at right now. Consider it done, Sloan said. The transfer will take about 10 minutes. By the time they finish dessert, you will be their landlord. I hung up the phone. I put it back in the black case. I started the engine of my old truck. It roared to life, coughing a little before settling into a steady hum. I did not drive away immediately. I sat there for a minute longer. They thought I was a poor old man. They thought I was powerless. They judged me by my skin and my clothes. They threw wine on my daughter because they thought there would be no consequences. I shifted the truck into gear. Enjoy the wine, Leland, I whispered to the empty cab. It is the last expensive thing you will ever taste. As I drove down the winding driveway of the estate, I did not look back. The war had begun. And unlike them, I did not fight with wine. I fought with ink. And my ink was about to turn their entire world red. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my kitchen with a cup of black coffee watching the sun rise over the trees. My phone sat on the table in front of me like a loaded gun. I was waiting. In a normal world, in a sane world, the phone would ring and it would be my son-in-law Bryce. He would be apologizing. He would be begging for forgiveness for the way his father treated my daughter. He would tell me that he stood up for his wife after I left. That is what a man would do. That is what a husband would do. But I knew Bryce Pembroke was neither of those things. At 9 in the morning, the phone finally rang. It was Gabrielle. My hand hovered over the device. I took a deep breath. I needed to be her father right now, not the man who used to dismantle governments. I needed to be soft. "Hello, baby girl," I said. There was silence on the other end. Then I heard a sniffle. "Daddy," she whispered. Her voice sounded small and broken, like she was 6 years old again and had scraped her knee. "Daddy, why did you have to make such a scene last night?" I froze. My grip on the coffee mug tightened. "I made a scene," I asked, keeping my voice calm. "Gabrielle, he threw wine in your face. He humiliated you in front of everyone." I know," she said, rushing to defend him. "But that is just how Leland is. He is under a lot of stress with the merger, and honestly, Daddy, the turkey was a little dry. I should have checked it earlier. I embarrassed Bryce. I embarrassed the family." I closed my eyes. This was not just fear. This was conditioning. This was years of psychological abuse layered so thick that she could not see the light of day anymore. They had twisted her reality until she believed that being assaulted was her fault. They had broken my brilliant daughter. "Gabrielle, listen to me," I said firmly. "A man who throws wine at a woman is not stressed. He is a bully. You did nothing wrong. Please stop," she cried. "You are making it worse. Bryce is so angry. He says you disrespected his father in his own home. He says you ruined the most important networking night of the year. Daddy, you have to fix this. Please. I cannot deal with the yelling anymore." The pain in her voice cut me deeper than any knife. She was terrified. Not of me, but of what would happen to her if I did not submit. They were holding her hostage emotionally. "Put him on the phone," I said. "He does not want to talk to you," she said. "Put him on Gabrielle." I heard some shuffling and then a heavy sigh. The voice that came on the line was dripping with arrogance. "Well, look who it is," Bryce said. "The man of the hour. I hope you are happy, Ulysses. My father is talking about cutting us out of the will because of your little stunt. Do you have any idea how much money you cost me last night?" "I cost you nothing, Bryce," I said. "Your father lacks basic human decency." "Careful, old man," Bryce snapped. "You are on very thin ice. Gabrielle is crying in the kitchen because of you. Do you want her to be miserable? Is that what you want?" "No," I said. "I want my daughter to be happy." "Then you need to pay for your mistake," Bryce said. His voice took on a greedy edge. "My father is furious, but I think I can talk him down. I can convince him to invite you back for Christmas. I can convince him to forgive Gabrielle, but it is going to require a gesture, a significant gesture of apology." I stared out the window at the dense forest surrounding my cabin. I knew exactly where this was going. What do you want, Bryce? I asked. That plot of land you have, Bryce said quickly. The one by the lake. The 20 acres you bought years ago when land was cheap. I knew the land he was talking about. It was prime real estate now. Developers had been circling it for years. It was worth at least $2 million. I had bought it with the intention of building a house for Gabrielle one day. What about it? I asked. Transfer it to me, Bryce said. Sign it over to Pembroke Real Estate. We can use it to develop a new golf course extension. If you give us that land, my father will see that you are truly sorry. He will see that you understand the value of family legacy. It is the only way, Ulysses. You want me to give you a $2 million property because your father threw wine at my daughter? I asked. Don't be dramatic. Bryce laughed. It is just dirt to you. You live in a shack. What do you need 20 acres for? Besides, think of it as an investment in your daughter's future. If you do not do this, my father is going to cut us off completely. And if we are poor, Gabrielle suffers. Do you want that on your conscience? Then came the threat, the real leverage. And Ulysses Bryce added, his voice dropping low. If you do not fix this, do not expect to see us at Christmas. Do not expect to see us at all. I will not have toxic people around my family. If you do not sign that land over, you are dead to us. Dead to us. The words hung in the air. He was threatening to erase me from my daughter's life unless I paid him a ransom. He was selling me access to my own child. I felt the cold rage returning. It settled in my chest like a block of ice. In my past life, men had tried to blackmail me before, men much scarier than Bryce Pembroke. Those men usually ended up disappearing into the night. But I could not make Bryce disappear. Not yet. I needed him to believe he had won. I needed him to believe I was weak. I let my breath hitch. I made my voice tremble. I forced myself to sound like a beaten old man. Please, Bryce, I stammered. Do not do that. Gabrielle is all I have. Then do the right thing, Bryce said, sensing blood in the water. Sign the papers. I will, I said. I will do it. Just please do not keep her away from me. That land is my retirement, but if it means saving her marriage, I will give it to you. Good, Bryce said. I knew you would be reasonable eventually. Come to my father's office at noon. Bring the deed. And Ulysses, wear a better suit this time. You are meeting with businessmen, not janitors. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there for a long moment listening to the dial tone. Slowly I placed the phone back on the table. The trembling in my hands stopped instantly. My posture straightened. The scared old man vanished, and Ulysses Mercer returned. They wanted the land. They wanted to take the last thing of value they thought I owned. They thought they were robbing a helpless senior citizen. I stood up and walked to the bedroom. I pushed aside the heavy oak dresser, revealing a wall safe. I spun the dial. Right, left, right. The heavy steel door clicked open. Inside were stacks of cash, gold coins, and documents. I pulled out the deed to the lakefront property. I looked at it. It was a legitimate deed. But I also pulled out another file, a file labeled Pembroke Debt Acquisition. I sat at my desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of legal paper. I began to draft a document. To the untrained eye, it would look exactly like a standard property transfer. It would have all the legal jargon. It would have the watermarks. But the clauses in the fine print were very specific. I was not just going to give them the land, I was going to give them a Trojan horse. I picked up my secure phone and dialed Sloan again. Mercer, she answered on the first ring. I need a notary, I said. One of ours. I am going into the Lion's Den at noon. Is the acquisition complete? She asked. Yes, I said. We own their debt. Now I'm going to give them the rope to hang themselves. They demanded the lakefront property as a peace offering. They are trying to extort you, she said. Her voice was cold. Yes, I said. And I am going to let them. I am going to sign it over. Sir, that land is worth millions. It is worth more than money today, I said. It is the bait. I want you to prepare the secondary filings. When I sign this transfer, I want it to trigger the acceleration clause on their business loans. They think they are getting an asset, but they are actually triggering a default on their main line of credit because of the conflict of interest clause hidden in their own company bylaws. You want to use their own greed to breach their contract with the bank, Sloan asked. Exactly, I said. By accepting a personal gift of this value from a known creditor, which I am now, they violate their fiduciary duty. The moment they countersign this deed, they bankrupt themselves. Sloan let out a rare, low laugh. That is diabolical, sir. They wanted a donation, I said. I am giving them one. Have the notary meet me in the lobby of their building, and Sloan make sure the car is ready. I am done driving the truck for today. I hung up. I looked at the mirror. I saw an old man with gray hair and sad eyes. It was a good disguise. It had fooled everyone for 10 years. I went to the closet. I pushed past the flannel shirts and the denim jeans. Way in the back, covered in plastic, was a suit. It was a bespoke charcoal gray suit tailored in Savile Row. I brushed my hand against the fabric. Not yet. I could not wear the armor yet. I grabbed a worn-out beige jacket instead, one with a fraying cuff. I needed to look pathetic. I needed them to gloat. I needed them to feel so superior that they would not bother to read the fine print. I walked out of the cabin. The air was still cold. I climbed into my truck. I drove toward the city, toward the glass tower that had Pembroke written on the top in gold letters. They were waiting for a victim. They were waiting for a broken father who would give up everything for a scrap of affection. They were going to get exactly what they asked for, and it was going to destroy them. I pulled up to a stoplight. I looked at the passenger seat where the folder of documents lay. "You want the land, Bryce," I said to the empty air. "You can have it, but you should have learned to read the fine print." The light turned green. I pressed the gas. The hunt was on. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor of the Pembroke Tower was silent. The mirrored walls reflected a tired old man in a cheap jacket holding a manila folder against his chest. I looked at myself, and for a second, I almost believed the lie. I looked defeated. I looked like a man who had lost the war before the first shot was fired. But then I looked closer at my eyes. The fire was still there, burning cold and steady. I stepped out into the lobby. The receptionist looked up from her desk. She wrinkled her nose as if she smelled something rotting. "Mr. Pembroke is expecting you," she said, without offering me a seat. "Go right in." I walked down the long hallway. The walls were lined with awards and newspaper clippings praising Leland Pembroke as a visionary. I knew the truth. I knew about the bribes, the cut corners, and the contractors he never paid. Today I was going to balance those books. I pushed open the heavy double doors to the executive suite. The office was vast. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. Leland sat behind a desk that was the size of a small boat. Bryce stood by the window looking out at the skyline. Neither of them stood up when I entered. "You are late," Leland said, not looking up from his computer screen. "We do not operate on colored people time here, Ulysses. We operate on money time." "I'm sorry," I said, lowering my head. The traffic was bad and my truck overheated. Bryce turned around. He smirked. He looked at my jacket. He looked at the folder in my hands. He looked like a predator eyeing a wounded gazelle. "Did you bring it?" Bryce asked. "Yes," I said. I held up the folder. "The deed is in here. Everything is signed by the notary." Leland finally looked up. His eyes were cold and dead. He extended a hand. "Let me see it." I walked forward. The carpet was so thick my boots sank into it. I placed the folder on his desk. Leland opened it. He scanned the pages. He was looking for the property description. He was looking for the acreage. He was looking for the dollar signs. He was not looking for the transfer clauses. He was not looking for the trap. "It seems to be in order," Leland grunted. He closed the folder. "But there is one thing missing." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a separate document, a single sheet of paper. "This is a liability waiver," Leland said. "It states that you are giving this gift of your own free will and that you will not seek any future compensation or contact with the Pembroke family. It also states that you acknowledge that your daughter is a member of this family by marriage only and that you have no rights to visit this property ever again." My heart hammered against my ribs. They were trying to ban me from the land I bought for my daughter. They were trying to erase me completely. "I cannot sign that," I whispered. "I just want to see my grandchildren if they ever come." "Sign it or get out," Bryce snapped. He walked over and stood next to his father. "You have no leverage here, old man. You want Gabrielle to have a happy marriage. You want us to forgive her for her incompetence. This is the price." I looked from Bryce to Leland. They were enjoying this. They were feeding on my desperation. "Fine," I said. My voice cracked perfectly. "I will sign." Leland smiled. It was a shark smile. He picked up a pen from his desk. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy black lacquer with gold trim, a pen worth more than my truck. He held it out to me. As I reached for it, he opened his fingers. The pen dropped. It hit the carpet with a soft thud. It rolled under the chair. "Oops," Leland said. His voice was flat, devoid of any apology. Clumsy me. Pick it up, Ulysses. I stood there. The disrespect was physical. It was a slap in the face. He wanted me to kneel. He wanted me to crawl at his feet like a dog. Bryce chuckled, covering his mouth with his hand. Go on, Bryce said. Pick it up. You are used to scrubbing floors, right? It should be natural for you. I took a slow breath. I bent my knees. I lowered my body to the floor. I reached under the chair. My fingers closed around the cold metal of the pen. For a second, I imagined jamming it into Leland's leg. I imagined the scream. I imagined the blood ruining his expensive carpet. But I pushed the thought away. Not today. Today was about a different kind of pain. I stood up. I placed the pen on the table. Thank you, I said. Leland tapped the paper. Sign here and here. I pulled the chair out and sat down. My hands were shaking. I made sure they saw the tremors. I put on my reading glasses, which were actually just cheap frames with clear glass I bought at a pharmacy. I leaned over the document. I began to read. I read slowly. I moved my finger under every word. I paused at the commas. I squinted at the paragraphs. Come on, Bryce groaned. It is standard legal boilerplate. Just sign the damn thing. We have a lunch reservation at 1. I just want to be sure, I mumbled. My eyes are not what they used to be. I read the waiver. Then I pulled the deed out of the folder. I read that too. I needed to make sure they had not swapped the pages. They had not. The Trojan horse was still there. The acceleration clause was hidden in plain sight under the section titled Encumbrances and Liens. It referenced a separate document number which corresponded to the debt I had purchased last night. By signing this, they were acknowledging the debt and triggering an immediate repayment demand. You are wasting my time, Ulysses Leland barked. He slammed his hand on the desk. Sign the paper, or I am calling security to drag you out, and Gabrielle can pack her bags tonight. I jumped in my seat, feigning terror. Okay, I said. I am signing. I gripped the pen. I am a right-handed man. I have been right-handed for 68 years. I pitched baseball with my right hand. I fired rifles with my right hand. I held my wife's hand with my right hand. But today, my right hand rested on the table. I took the pen in my left hand. My grip was awkward. The pen felt foreign. I touched the tip to the paper. I let my hand shake violently. The ink bled into the paper, forming a jagged, messy line. Ulysses Mercer. The signature looked like the scrawl of a child or a man suffering from severe dementia. It was illegible, it was pathetic, and legally it was contestable. If they ever tried to enforce this waiver in court, my lawyers would argue that I was under duress and that the signature did not match my official records. But the deed, the transfer of the land, that was different. That signature triggered the bank's algorithm automatically. I signed the deed with the same shaky left hand. There, I said, putting the pen down. It is done. Leland snatched the papers away. He inspected them. He did not notice the wrong hand. He only saw the victory. He only saw the free land. Finally, Leland said. He waved his hand at me as if swatting a fly. Now get out. The air in here is getting stale. What about Christmas, I asked. Can I come to Christmas? We will see, Bryce said, ushering me toward the door. Do not hold your breath. We will let Gabrielle know if we have a spot for you in the garage. They laughed. Both of them. A loud, hearty laugh of men who thought they were gods. I walked to the door. I did not look back. I did not say goodbye. I stepped out into the hallway. The heavy doors clicked shut behind me, sealing the sound of their laughter inside. I walked past the receptionist. She did not look up. I pressed the elevator button. The arrow above the door lit up. 3, 2, 1. Ding. The elevator doors opened. But before I could step inside, the silence of the hallway was shattered. It started with a phone ringing. Then another. Then a scream. It came from the executive suite. It was the shrill, panicked voice of Leland's executive secretary, a woman named Martha who had been with the company for 20 years. Mr. Pembroke, she screamed. Mr. Pembroke, stop the meeting. I paused. I let my hand hover over the elevator sensor to keep the doors open. I wanted to hear this. The double doors I had just exited flew open. Martha ran down the hallway clutching a tablet. Her face was pale. She looked like she had seen a ghost. She burst into the office. I could hear her voice clearly through the open door. Sir, the accounts, she yelled. The operating accounts, they are frozen. All of them. "What are you talking about?" I heard Leland bellow. "Call the bank. It must be a glitch." "I did call them," Martha cried. "I called 3 branches. They said the accounts have been flagged for immediate liquidation. They said the primary creditor has called in the loans." "What creditor?" Leland shouted. "We are with First National. We have a standing line of credit." "Not anymore," Martha sobbed. "The debt was sold. It was sold last night to a private equity firm. And sir, they just registered a new asset transfer. The deed you just signed. It triggered a cross-default provision." "What?" Bryce yelled. His voice was cracking. "What does that mean?" "It means the entire loan is due," Martha screamed. "Now. Right now. $200 million. They are seizing the assets. They are seizing the payroll. They are seizing everything." I heard the sound of glass shattering. Someone had thrown a glass against the wall. "Who?" I heard Leland roar. "Who is the creditor? Who bought the debt?" I leaned against the elevator wall. I checked my watch. It was 12:15. Sloan was efficient. I did not wait to hear the answer. I knew the answer. I stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sound of their panic. As the elevator descended, I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my reading glasses and crushed them in my hand. I dropped the pieces into the trash can in the corner of the elevator. I took out a silk handkerchief from my inner pocket and wiped my left hand. It felt cramped from the awkward grip. I flexed my fingers. The descent was smooth. The music in the elevator was a soft jazz tune. It was calming. By the time I reached the lobby, the smile on my face was gone. But inside, I was laughing. I walked out of the building. The sun was shining. I pulled out my phone. A text message from Sloan was waiting on the screen. It read simply, "Target acquired. Power cut scheduled for 1800 hours." I typed back a single word. "Proceed." I walked to my truck. I had a long drive back to the cabin. And I needed to stop at the store. I needed to buy some candles. Gabrielle was going to need them when she came crying to me tonight. And this time I would be ready to dry her tears not with a handkerchief but with the truth. The trap was sprung, the rats were caught, and the extermination had just begun. I drove back to my cabin in silence, but my mind was loud. I could not hear the chaos happening inside the Pembroke offices, but I could feel it. I knew exactly how the algorithm worked. I had designed it myself years ago to destroy competitors who played dirty. It was a domino effect. First the primary loan is called, then the secondary creditors get alerted, then the vendors, then the credit card companies. It moves faster than a virus. By 2 in the afternoon, I was sitting in my favorite armchair. On the table in front of me was a tablet. The screen was split into 4 views. I was not watching television. I was watching the internal security feed of the Pembroke real estate headquarters and the living room of my daughter's house. I had installed these cameras years ago when I helped them with their renovation. Bryce thought I was just being a helpful father-in-law who was good with tools. He never asked why the smoke detectors had such large lenses. I watched the office feed first. It was a masterpiece of destruction. Leland was pacing around his office like a caged animal. His tie was undone. His face was a map of panic. He was shouting into a phone that I knew was dead. "Fix it," he screamed at the receiver. "I do not care what the computer says. I am Leland Pembroke. I have banked with you for 30 years. He slammed the phone down. It bounced off the cradle and fell to the floor. Bryce was sitting on the leather sofa, his head in his hands. He looked small. He looked like a boy who had lost his mother at the supermarket. "It is over, Dad," Bryce said. His voice was muffled through the hidden microphone. "I just tried to use the corporate card to order lunch. Declined. I tried to use my personal card. Declined. They froze everything. Even the petty cash account is locked." "Shut up," Leland roared. He turned on his son. "This is your fault. You and that stupid wife of yours. If you had just managed her better, if you had just kept that old man happy, none of this would have happened." "My fault." Bryce stood up, his fear turning into anger. "You were the one who threw wine at her. You were the one who demanded the land. I told you it was a trap. I told you the old man was acting strange." "You are weak," Leland spat. "You let a gardener and his daughter ruin us. Get out of my sight. Go fix this. Go sell something. Go beg on the street. I do not care. Just get me some liquidity before the market closes or we are finished." I watched Bryce storm out of the office. He kicked a trash can on his way out, sending papers flying everywhere. The staff outside the glass walls pretended not to see. They were too busy packing their own boxes. They knew a sinking ship when they saw one. I switched the audio off on the office feed. I had seen enough. The rats were eating each other. I maximized the screen for the living room of the mansion. Gabrielle was there. She was on her hands and knees scrubbing the carpet where the wine had fallen the night before. She was humming a soft tune, trying to keep herself calm. She did not know that her husband was coming home and he was bringing a storm with him. I leaned forward. My heart rate began to climb. I wanted to call her. I wanted to tell her to get out. But I knew she would not listen. She would think I was interfering again. She needed to see who Bryce really was. She needed to see the monster without his mask. The front door flew open. Bryce stormed in. He did not wipe his feet. He marched straight into the living room. Gabrielle looked up. She wiped a strand of hair from her face. She smiled. It was a brave smile. "Hi, honey," she said. "You are home early. Is everything okay? I am almost done with the stain." Bryce did not answer. He looked around the room. His eyes were wild. He was looking for something to destroy. He needed to feel powerful because out in the world he had been stripped of all his power. He walked over to the side table. On it sat a beautiful ceramic vase. I had bought it for them on their first anniversary. It was blue and white, hand-painted in Italy. Bryce picked it up. Bryce, Gabrielle said, standing up, "What are you doing?" He looked at her. Then he looked at the vase. "Your father," he whispered. His voice was trembling with rage. "Your father did this." He hurled the vase against the fireplace. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. The sound was sharp and violent. Gabrielle screamed. She covered her mouth with her hands. "Bryce, please," she cried. "You are scaring me. What happened?" "What happened?" Bryce yelled, stepping over the shards of pottery. "What happened is that your father is a snake. He tricked us. He bankrupted us. We have nothing, Gabrielle. Nothing. The cards are dead. The accounts are zero. We are going to lose the house. We are going to lose the cars. And it is all because of you." "Me?" Gabrielle sobbed. "I did not do anything." "You exist," Bryce shouted. "You brought that old man into my life. I should have listened to my father. I should have married someone from my own world, someone who knows how to be an asset, not a liability." He walked toward her. Gabrielle backed away until she hit the wall. She looked trapped. Bryce stopped in front of her. He was breathing hard. He looked at the woman who loved him, the woman who cooked for him, the woman who cleaned his messes. And he did not see a wife. He saw a target. I gripped the sides of my tablet. My knuckles turned white. "Do not do it, Bryce," I whispered to the screen. "Do not make me come down there." Bryce raised his hand. "You are useless," he hissed. "Just like your father." He swung. It was not a shove like before. It was a slap, a full-force backhand. The sound was sickening. It echoed through the high-quality speakers of my surveillance system. Gabrielle's head snapped to the side. She crumbled to the floor, holding her cheek. She did not scream this time. She just wept quietly, curling into a ball to protect herself. Bryce stood over her. He looked at his hand. For a second, I thought he might regret it. I thought he might kneel down and apologize, but he did not. He adjusted his cuffs. He stepped back. "Stop crying," he said coldly. "It makes you look ugly. I am going to the study to drink whatever whiskey is left before the bank takes that too. Clean this mess up, and do not disturb me." He walked away, leaving my daughter sobbing on the floor, surrounded by broken ceramic and the shattered remains of her dignity. I set the tablet down. I stood up. I walked to the window of my cabin. I looked out at the trees. I took a deep breath. In, out. The rage was gone. It had been replaced by something else. Something much colder, something much more dangerous. Calculated execution. I could call the police. I could have him arrested for domestic battery, but he would be out on bail in an hour. He would hire a lawyer. He would blame the stress. He would blame her, and Gabrielle, in her current state, might even forgive him. No. Police were for civilians. I was not a civilian. I was a judgment day. I walked back to my desk. I picked up the secure phone. "Sloan," I said. "I am here, sir," she answered immediately. Her voice was tight. She had been monitoring the feed too. "I saw it, sir. Do you want me to send a team?" "No," I said. "Not yet. If we send a team now, it becomes a rescue. I do not want a rescue. I want a siege. I want him to feel what it is like to be powerless," I said. "I want him to know what it feels like to be cold and dark and alone." "What are your orders?" Sloan asked. "Kill the grid," I said. Everything she asked. Everything I replied. Electricity, water, internet, gas. I want that mansion to be nothing more than a stone cave. I want the smart locks to freeze. I want the heating to die. I want the refrigerator to stop humming, understood, Sloan said. Accessing the utility mainframe now, bypassing the local substation, rerouting the connection. I watched the screen. Bryce had just entered the study. He was pouring a glass of scotch. He looked satisfied with himself. He thought he was the king of his castle. Suddenly the light on his desk flickered. He looked up. Then darkness. The screen on my tablet went black for a second before switching to night vision mode. The image turned grainy and green. I saw Bryce freeze in the dark. "Hey!" he shouted. "Hey, what is going on?" He stumbled to the light switch. He clicked it up and down. Click, click, click. Nothing. I switched the view to the living room. Gabrielle was still on the floor. When the lights went out, she stopped crying. She looked up. The darkness was not scary to her. It was a shield. It hid her from him. I picked up the phone again. "Cut the water," I said. "Done," Sloan said. "Main valve shut off remotely." "Cut the cell signal," I said. "Deploy the jammer drone." "Drone is airborne," Sloan said. "It will be over the property in 2 minutes. They will have 0 bars, no outgoing calls, no internet data." "Good," I said. I sat back down. I watched the green, glowing image of my son-in-law stumbling around in the dark. He bumped his shin against the desk and howled in pain. "Who turned out the lights?" he screamed. I took a sip of my cold coffee. "I did, Bryce," I said to the silent room. I looked at the time. It was 5 in the evening. The sun was setting fast. The temperature was dropping. Tonight was going to be freezing. "Welcome to the Stone Age," I whispered. I watched as Bryce tried to use his phone. He held it up to the window. He walked in circles. He tapped the screen furiously. "No signal," he muttered. "What the hell is happening?" He was beginning to panic. He was realizing that he was not just broke. He was cut off. He was isolated. And he was locked in a cage with the consequences of his actions. I watched Gabrielle stand up slowly in the dark living room. She did not call out for him. She did not ask for help. She walked toward the kitchen. She knew where the candles were. She knew how to survive in the dark. I had taught her that. Bryce, on the other hand, was helpless. I settled in for a long night. The show was just beginning. They had taken my light away, my joy away when they hurt my daughter. Now I was taking their light away, literally. Let them sit in the dark, I thought. Let them freeze. Let them think about who they really are when the money and the power and the lights are gone. I kept my eyes on the screen. I would not blink. I would not sleep. I was the guardian in the shadows, and tomorrow when the sun came up, I would bring the fire. The mansion was silent. It was not the peaceful silence of a library or a church. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a dead machine. For the first time in its existence, the Pembroke estate was just a pile of brick and mortar. Without electricity, the smart home system was lobotomized. The automated blinds were stuck halfway down. The climate control system, which kept the air at a perfect 72 degrees, was dead. The temperature inside was dropping rapidly, matching the freezing November air outside. I watched it all from my tablet. The night vision cameras showed me a world of expensive shadows. I saw the refrigerator in the gourmet kitchen, the one that cost $10,000 and had a touch screen. It was slowly warming up. The imported cheeses, the organic meats, the vintage champagnes were all sweating in the dark. A puddle of water from the melting ice maker was spreading across the marble floor. It was a small detail, but it satisfied me. It was the first sign of decay. Bryce was pacing in the living room. He was wearing his cashmere coat over his suit. He looked ridiculous. He was holding his phone up in the air, walking in circles, trying to find a signal that did not exist. My jammer drone was hovering silently 500 feet above the roof, creating an invisible dome of isolation. He was cut off from his bankers. He was cut off from his lawyers. He was cut off from the ego boost of social media. I watched him try to turn on the gas fireplace. He clicked the remote over and over again. He did not know that the electronic starter required power. He screamed in frustration and threw the remote against the wall. It cracked. Another piece of his perfect world broken. Gabrielle was in the guest room. She had wrapped herself in a quilt. She was sitting by the window reading a book by the light of a single candle. She looked peaceful. She was used to making do with less. She knew how to find warmth within herself. But Bryce was hollow. Without external comfort, he was collapsing. Around 8 o'clock, Bryce could not take it anymore. The cold had seeped into his bones. The silence was driving him mad. But mostly it was the inconvenience. He was a man who had never been told no by a machine. I saw him grab his keys. He stormed out of the house, leaving the front door unlocked. He did not care about safety anymore. He just wanted to escape the tomb he had built. I knew where he was coming. There was only one place nearby. There was only one person he thought he could bully into helping him. I put the tablet away. I went to the kitchen and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. The smell filled the small cabin. It smelled like warmth. It smelled like safety. 20 minutes later, headlights swept across my front window. My dogs started barking. I silenced them with a command. There was a heavy pounding on the door. It was not a polite knock. It was the fist of an entitled man. I opened the door. Bryce stood there shivering. His expensive Italian shoes were covered in mud from my unpaved driveway. His hair was messy. His eyes were bloodshot. He did not say hello. He pushed past me into the cabin. "God, it smells like wet dog in here," he said, wrinkling his nose. He walked straight to the wood stove and held his hands out to the heat. He rubbed them together aggressively. "We lost power," he announced, as if I should care. "The whole estate is dark. Probably a blown transformer. The power company is useless. I cannot get a signal to call them." I closed the door slowly, keeping the cold air out. I leaned against the frame and crossed my arms. "Hello, Bryce," I said. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Bryce ignored my greeting. He turned his back to the stove and looked around my cabin with disdain. He looked at the simple wooden furniture. He looked at the old books on the shelf. "I need a shower," he said. "The water heater at the house is electric. I cannot take a cold shower. I have a meeting tomorrow morning. I need to look presentable." He started unbuttoning his coat. He threw it onto my rocking chair. "And I need cash," he continued. "The credit card terminals are down everywhere. I need gas for the car. I need to buy some food since the fridge is dead." He looked at me expectantly. He was not asking. He was ordering. In his mind, he was doing me a favor by being here. He was gracing my hovel with his presence. "Well," he said, "do not just stand there, Ulysses. Get me a towel and make me a coffee. I have a headache." I did not move. I stared at him. I looked at the man who had slapped my daughter 4 hours ago. I looked at the man who had laughed while his father humiliated me. And now he was standing in my home demanding my water and my money. The audacity was breathtaking. I walked over to the rocking chair. I picked up his cashmere coat. It was soft. It was warm. I opened the front door and threw it out into the mud. Bryce's jaw dropped. "What the hell are you doing?" he shouted. "That is a $3,000 coat. You have 3 seconds to follow it," I said. My voice was low and steady. Bryce laughed. It was a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Are you joking?" he asked. "You are kicking me out. After everything I have done for you, I let you come to Thanksgiving, I let you see your daughter, and now, when I am in a crisis, you are going to be petty." "You hit her," I said. Bryce froze. For a second he looked guilty, but then the arrogance returned. "She told you," he sneered. "Of course she did. She runs to Daddy every time things get real. Look, Ulysses' marriage is complicated. You would not understand. Sometimes people get emotional. It is none of your business." He took a step toward me. He tried to use his height to intimidate me. He was taller than me. He was younger than me. He spent hours in the gym sculpting muscles that were only for show. "Now give me the money," he said, his voice hardening. "I know you keep cash in here. I saw you take it out of the wall earlier. Give me $5,000. Call it a loan. I will pay you back when the bank fixes their screw-up." He held out his hand. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my money clip. Bryce smiled. He thought he had won. He thought I was afraid. I peeled off a single bill, a $20 bill. I let it flutter to the floor. It landed between his muddy shoes. "There," I said. "There is a public gym 5 miles down the road. A shower costs $10. Use the rest to buy yourself a sandwich, and keep the change. You are going to need it." Bryce looked at the money. Then he looked at me. His face turned a deep, violent red. The veins in his neck bulged. "You senile old fool," he spat. "You think you can humiliate me. You think you can treat a Pembroke like a beggar." He lunged. It was a clumsy move. A wide telegraphed haymaker with his right hand. He put all his weight behind it. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to break the old man. Time seemed to slow down. I did not feel fear. I felt muscle memory. I did not step back. I stepped in. As his fist approached my face, I raised my left forearm, deflecting the blow upward. The force of his swing exposed his entire midsection. With my right hand, I struck. I did not use a fist. I used the ridge of my hand striking the solar plexus. It was a precise, controlled hit. Not enough to kill, but enough to shut down the diaphragm instantly. Bryce made a sound like a deflating tire. His eyes bulged. All the air left his body. Before he could collapse, I grabbed his right wrist. I twisted it behind his back, locking the joint. I applied 3 pounds of pressure. Bryce screamed. I spun him around and kicked the back of his knee. His leg buckled. He went down face first into the hard wooden floor. Bang! His nose hit the floorboards. Blood started to pool instantly. I held him there. One hand on his wrist, the other pressing his face into the wood. I was not breathing hard. My heart rate had barely elevated. Bryce was gasping for air, trying to struggle, but every time he moved, I applied a fraction more pressure to his wrist, sending a bolt of pain up his arm. "Stop," he wheezed. "Stop. You are breaking it." I leaned down. I put my mouth right next to his ear. "Listen to me, boy," I whispered. "And listen good." I tightened the grip. "You think you are a wolf because you have money," I said, "but you are just a sheep with a credit card. You have never fought for your life. You have never been cold. You have never been hungry." I grabbed a handful of his hair and pulled his head up, then slammed it back down gently but firmly. I said, "I have survived things that would turn your blood to ice." Bryce was crying now, tears mixed with the blood on the floor. He was terrified. The illusion of the frail old father-in-law was gone. He was realizing that he was in the cage with something he did not understand. "Who are you?" he sobbed. "What are you?" "I am the man who is going to teach you a lesson," I said. I stood up. I released his arm. Bryce scrambled backward, crab walking across the floor. He held his wrist. He looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. He looked at the way I stood. My stance was balanced. My hands were loose. This was not how a factory worker stood. This was how a soldier stood. "Get out," I said. Bryce did not argue. He did not threaten. He scrambled to his feet, slipping on his own blood. He ran to the door. He paused for 1 second at the threshold, looking back at me. He saw the $20 bill still lying on the floor. "Take it," I said. He hesitated. His pride was warring with his desperation, but desperation won. He bent down, snatched the $20 bill, and ran out into the night. I watched him go. I watched him grab his muddy coat from the ground and dive into his car. He peeled out of the driveway, his tires spinning in the dirt. I closed the door. I locked it. I went to the kitchen sink and washed my hands. I scrubbed them thoroughly. I did not want his weakness on me. I walked back to the living room. I looked at the spot of blood on the floor. I would clean it later. I picked up the tablet. I switched the camera back to the mansion. Bryce would be returning to a cold, dark house. He would be returning with a broken nose and a bruised ego. He would try to explain to Gabrielle what happened, but he would never admit that an old man beat him. He would lie, but Gabrielle would see the fear in his eyes, and that was the first step. I sat back down in my chair. I took a sip of coffee. It was still warm. The physical war was over. I had won the skirmish, but the psychological war was just beginning. Tomorrow I would take everything else. Tomorrow I would strip the skin off the Pembroke legacy until there was nothing left but bone. I looked at the camera feed of Gabrielle sleeping by the window. "Sleep well, baby girl," I whispered. "Daddy is awake, and the monsters are scared." I cleaned the blood off the floorboards with a rag and a bucket of bleach water. It was a familiar task. I had cleaned up messes for powerful men for 40 years. Cleaning up the blood of a coward like Bryce Pembroke felt almost therapeutic. I scrubbed until the wood was pale and smelled of chemicals. I threw the rag into the wood stove and watched it burn. The evidence of my violence turned to ash and smoke. An hour later, the headlights swept across my front yard again. This time, I did not need to check the security camera. I knew who it was. I unlocked the door and waited. Gabrielle walked in. She was not wearing a coat. She was wrapped in the same quilt I had seen her wearing on the monitor. Her feet were bare inside a pair of slip-on sneakers. Her face was swollen. The bruise on her cheek where Bryce had hit her was turning a dark, ugly purple. She did not say a word. She walked straight into my arms. I held her. I held my little girl. I felt her shaking against me. It was a deep, bone-rattling tremor that had nothing to do with the cold outside. It was the shaking of a soul that had finally shattered. I made coffee. I wrapped another blanket around her shoulders. I sat her down in the armchair where I had watched her suffering only hours before. "I am sorry," she whispered. Her voice was raspy from crying. "I am so sorry, Daddy. You were right. You were right about everything." I sat on the coffee table in front of her. I took her cold hands in mine. "Why did you stay, Gabrielle?" I asked gently. "I need to know. You are a smart woman. You run $1 million charity. You are strong. Why did you let this man reduce you to this?" Gabrielle looked down at her hands. Tears dripped onto her lap. "He has a video," she said. The air in the cabin went still. "What kind of video?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "A private one," she said. "From our honeymoon." I did not know he was filming. He told me about it 6 months ago when I first threatened to leave him. He said if I ever filed for divorce, he would leak it. He said he would send it to the board of directors of my charity. He said he would post it on social media. He said he would destroy my reputation so thoroughly that I would never be able to show my face in this town again. I closed my eyes for a second. The rage that flared in my chest was white hot. This was not just abuse. This was extortion. This was the weaponization of intimacy. Bryce had not just hit her. He had enslaved her using her own dignity as the chain. He told me I was nothing without the Pembroke name, she continued sobbing. He said I was just a lucky girl from the ghetto who married up. He said if I left him, I would go back to being trash. And today when the lights went out when he hit me, I realized he was right. I am Trash Daddy. I let him do this to me. I stood up. I walked to the window. I looked out at the dark forest. "You are not trash," I said. "You are a Mercer. And you have forgotten what that means because I have spent too long hiding who I really am." I turned back to her. "It is time you knew the truth, Gabrielle." I walked to the bedroom. I moved the dresser again. I opened the safe. I took out the second file, the one I had been compiling for 5 years, the one labeled Bryce Pembroke. I walked back and dropped the heavy file onto her lap. "Open it," I said. Gabrielle looked at me confused. She opened the folder. The first page was a bank statement. "What is this?" she asked. "That is a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands," I said. "It is owned by Bryce. Look at the deposits." She scanned the numbers. Her eyes widened. "These are transfers," she said, "from my charity, from the relief fund. $50,000 a month for 3 years, I said. "He has been skimming from your nonprofit. He forged your signature on the authorization forms. He is not just a bad husband, Gabrielle. He is a felon. He has been stealing from the orphans you are trying to help to pay for his gambling debts." Gabrielle flipped the page. Photos, high-resolution surveillance photos, Bryce with a blonde woman at a casino, Bryce with a brunette at a hotel in Miami, Bryce with the receptionist from his father's office. "He has a video of you," I said, "but I have terabytes of data on him. He told you he was working late. He was actually spending your donors' money on escorts and blackjack." Gabrielle stared at the photos. The image of the man she thought she was protecting, the man she had sacrificed her dignity for, dissolved before her eyes. "He cheated on me," she whispered. "With her, with all of them." "He did not just cheat," I said. "He laughed at you." "I have recordings, Gabrielle. Recordings of him bragging to his friends about how he has you on a leash. He called you his golden goose. He said as long as he had that video, he could spend your money forever." Gabrielle dropped the file. She put her hands over her face. She screamed. It was a scream of pure agony, of betrayal so deep it tore her apart. I let her scream. She needed to let the poison out. When she finally stopped, she looked up at me. Her eyes were different. The fear was gone, replaced by something harder, something that looked a lot like the look in my own eyes. "He threatened to destroy me," she said. Her voice was cold. "Yes," I said. "He stole from my foundation," she said. "Yes." "He hit me," I nodded. "So what do we do, Daddy?" she asked. "How do we make him stop?" I smiled. It was a wolf's smile. "We do not just make him stop, Gabrielle. We make him wish he had never been born." I stood up and walked to the center of the room. "Wait here," I said. I went into my bedroom and closed the door. I walked to the back of the closet. I pulled the plastic cover off the hanger. The suit was charcoal gray, Italian wool, hand-stitched. It had cost $6,000 10 years ago. It still fit perfectly. I took off my flannel shirt. I took off my work boots. I took off the disguise of the humble factory worker. I put on the white dress shirt. The silk felt cool against my skin. I fastened the buttons. I put on the trousers. I slid my feet into black leather Oxfords that shone like mirrors. I tied the tie, a full Windsor knot, precise, symmetrical. I put on the jacket. It settled onto my shoulders like a suit of armor. I adjusted the cuffs. Then I opened the small velvet box on the dresser. Inside sat the Patek Philippe Calatrava, rose gold, leather strap. It was a watch that whispered power. I strapped it onto my left wrist, covering the faint scar from an old knife fight. I looked in the mirror. Ulysses the gardener was gone. Ulysses the victim was gone. Standing there was Ulysses Mercer, the fixer, the man who had walked into boardrooms and made billionaires weep, the man who held the keys to the skeletons in everyone's closet. I opened the bedroom door. I walked out into the living room. Gabrielle looked up. Her mouth opened slightly. She had never seen me like this. She had grown up thinking I was poor. She had grown up thinking I scraped by. "Daddy," she whispered, "who are you?" I walked over to her. My footsteps sounded different, heavy, authoritative. "I am the man who is going to burn their world down," I said. I reached out a hand. "Stand up, Gabrielle." She took my hand. She stood up. She looked at my suit. She looked at the watch. She looked at my face. And for the first time in years, she looked safe. "Dry your tears," I said. "The time for crying is over. Tonight we do not mourn. Tonight we hunt." I picked up the file from her lap. "Do you still want to save your marriage?" I asked, testing her. Gabrielle looked at the photo of Bryce kissing another woman. She looked at the bank statement showing the stolen money. "No," she said. "I want to bury it." "Good," I said. I walked to the door and opened it. The cold night air rushed in, but this time it felt invigorating. "Come with me," I said. "We have a meeting to attend." "But it is midnight," she said. "Who are we meeting?" I pulled my phone out. I dialed a number. "Sloan," I said. "Go ahead, sir," Sloan answered. "Prepare the car," I said. "Not the truck. The Phantom." "Yes, sir," she said. "It is waiting in the garage behind the cabin." "And," Sloan, I added, "contact the board of directors for Pembroke Real Estate, and contact the FBI Financial Crimes Division. Tell them the chairman of Mercer Holdings has a tip about a massive embezzlement scheme." I hung up. Gabrielle was staring at me. "The Phantom," she asked. "You have a Rolls-Royce." "I have a lot of things you do not know about," I said, winking at her, "including a plan to get your reputation back and put your husband behind bars where he belongs." I held out my arm. "Shall we, Mrs. Pembroke? Or should I say Ms. Mercer?" Gabrielle straightened her spine. She pulled the quilt tighter around her like a royal cape. She lifted her chin. "Ms. Mercer," she said. "Definitely Ms. Mercer." We walked out of the cabin together. We walked past the rusted pickup truck. We walked around the back to the old barn that I kept padlocked. I punched in the code. The barn doors slid open. Inside, gleaming under the floodlights, sat the black Rolls-Royce Phantom. It was a beast of a car, a shark on wheels. I opened the passenger door for my daughter. "Get in," I said. "The war has officially begun." As I slid into the driver's seat and started the silent, powerful engine, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Leland and Bryce were sitting in the dark, freezing in their mansion, thinking they were waiting for the bank to open. They had no idea that the bank was coming to them, and the interest rate on their debt was going to be their lives. The sun rose over the city, but for the Pembroke men, it brought no warmth. I sat in the back of my Rolls-Royce Phantom, parked just down the street from the motel where they had spent the night. It was a cheap place, the kind with flickering neon signs and thin walls. It was the only place that took cash, and they did not have much cash left. I watched as they emerged. It was a pathetic sight. Leland Pembroke, the titan of real estate, was wearing the same suit he had worn yesterday. It was wrinkled and stained with sweat. Bryce walked behind him, limping slightly from the lesson I had taught him in my cabin. His nose was bandaged with white gauze he must have bought at a pharmacy. They looked like refugees from a disaster of their own making. They were desperate. Late last night, Sloan had sent an email to Leland's personal address. It was a lifeline. A meeting invitation from the chairman of Mercer Holdings. The subject line simply read, "Debt Restructuring Negotiation." To them, it was a miracle. They thought Mercer Holdings was just another corporate vulture they could charm or bribe. They thought they could walk into that room, flash their smiles, and get the accounts unfrozen. They had no idea that the chairman was the man they had thrown out of their house. I watched them try to make themselves presentable in the reflection of their car window. Leland tried to smooth his hair. Bryce tried to adjust his tie, but his hands were shaking. They were terrified, but they were also arrogant. Even at rock bottom, they believed they deserved to be on top. They believed that the world owed them a second chance. I signaled my driver. "Take us to the tower," I said. "I want to be in the chair before they arrive." The Phantom glided away. I adjusted my cuffs. Today, I was wearing a navy blue suit with a subtle pinstripe. It was sharper than a knife. I felt calm. The kind of calm that comes before an execution. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in the boardroom on the 50th floor of the Mercer building. The room was designed to intimidate. The table was 20 feet long, made of black obsidian. The walls were glass, offering a view of the entire city, including the Pembroke building, which looked small and insignificant from this height. Sloane walked in. She was holding a tablet. "They are here, sir," she said. "They are currently yelling at the receptionist because we asked for their IDs. "Let them in," I said. "And Sloane, remember the protocol. Do not use my name. Just refer to me as Mr. Chairman." "Understood," she said. She walked out. I turned my chair around. It was a high-backed leather executive chair. When I turned, it faced the window. Anyone walking into the room would only see the back of the chair and the back of my head. They would see the smoke from the cigar I had just lit curling up into the air. I heard the heavy double doors open. I heard the sound of expensive shoes on the marble floor, but the footsteps were hesitant. "Gentlemen," Sloane said, her voice dripping with ice. "The chairman is waiting for you. Please take a seat." I heard the sound of chairs being pulled out. I did not turn around. I stared out at the city. I took a slow drag of the cigar. Mr. Chairman Leland's voice rang out. It was shaky, but he was trying to sound confident. "Thank you for seeing us on such short notice. We are honored, truly honored. My name is Leland Pembroke, and this is my son Bryce. We represent Pembroke Real Estate." I remained silent. I let the silence stretch. I let it become uncomfortable. I wanted them to sweat. Leland cleared his throat. "I assume you are the one who purchased our debt yesterday," he continued. "I must say it was an aggressive move. Very impressive. But I think there has been a misunderstanding. A computer error, perhaps. Our assets are solid. We have never missed a payment in 30 years. This freeze on our accounts is, well, it is illegal. But we are willing to overlook it. We are willing to work with you." Still, I said nothing. I just tapped the ash from my cigar into the crystal ashtray. Bryce spoke up next. His voice sounded nasal because of his broken nose. "Look, sir," he said. "We know how this game works. You want a piece of the action. We can give you equity. We can give you a seat on the board. Just unlock the accounts. We have a liquidity crisis that needs to be solved by noon. If you help us, we can make you very rich." I almost laughed. They were offering to make me rich. Me. The man who owned the building they were sitting in. I decided it was time. I spoke to the window. My voice was deep and distorted slightly by the acoustics of the glass. "You say there has been a mistake, Leland," I said. Leland gasped. He seemed to recognize something in the voice, but he could not place it. It was out of context. "Yes, sir," he stammered. "A huge mistake. We are a respectable family. We are pillars of the community." "Pillars," I repeated. "Is that what you call men who throw wine at women?" The silence behind me was sudden and absolute. It was the sound of air leaving a room. I could hear Bryce's breath hitch. "Excuse me," Leland whispered. "I do not understand." I took one last drag of the cigar. I crushed it out in the ashtray. "You said you are willing to work with me," I said. "You said you want to offer me a seat on the board." "Yes," Leland said. His voice was trembling now. "Anything. Anything you want." I stood up. I gripped the back of the leather chair. "What I want," I said loudly, "is for you to learn some respect." I spun the chair. I turned around slowly to face them. The look on their faces was worth every penny of the $200 million I had spent to buy their debt. Leland's mouth fell open. His eyes bulged out of his head. He looked like he was having a stroke. He gripped the edge of the obsidian table so hard his fingernails turned white. Bryce made a choking sound. He fell back in his chair, nearly tipping it over. He raised his hands to his face as if to protect himself from another hit. Ulysses, Leland whispered. It was barely a sound. It was a prayer of disbelief. "Hello, Leland," I said. "Hello, Bryce." "No," Leland stammered. "No. This is not possible. You are the gardener. You are the factory worker. You drive a rusted truck." I walked around the table. I moved with purpose. I stood in front of them, towering over them in my Italian suit, my Patek Philippe catching the light. I am a retired factory worker, I said. That is true. But I retired because I had made enough money to buy and sell men like you 10 times over. You own Mercer Holdings, Bryce squeaked. I am Mercer Holdings, I said. It is my middle name. Did you never ask Gabrielle what her middle name was? Did you never ask about her history? No, because you were too busy looking down on her. Leland stood up. His legs were shaking so bad he had to lean on the table. This is a trick, he shouted. His face was turning purple. You are an actor. Someone hired you. Gabrielle hired you. Where is the real chairman? I want to speak to the real chairman. I looked at Sloan. Sloan, I said, show him the deed. Sloan projected an image onto the large screen on the wall. It was the deed to the lakefront property, the one they had forced me to sign yesterday. Zoom in on the signature, I said. The image zoomed in. It showed the shaky left-handed scrawl. And now zoom in on the acquisition document, I said. The screen changed. It showed the document authorizing the purchase of the Pembroke debt. At the bottom was a signature. Bold, strong, elegant, Ulysses Mercer. And next to it was my fingerprint seal. Leland looked at the screen. Then he looked at me. The denial was fading, replaced by a horror so pure it smelled like ozone. You set us up, he whispered. You planned this. I did not plan anything, Leland, I said. I was happy to live my quiet life. I was happy to let you play the big shot. But then you hurt my daughter. I leaned across the table. I got right in his face. You threw wine in her face, I hissed. You called her a peasant. You made her scrub your floor. And you, Bryce, you slapped her. You cheated on her. You stole from her. I did not know, Bryce cried. I did not know you had money. If you had known, you would have treated her better, I interrupted. And that is exactly the problem. You only respect money. You do not respect people. You do not respect loyalty. You do not respect love. So I decided to speak your language. I picked up a file from the table. I threw it down in front of them. That is the demand letter, I said. The full amount of your loans is due immediately. $215 million. Do you have it? Leland sank back into his chair. He looked small. He looked old. We do not have it, he whispered. You know we do not have it. Our assets are illiquid. We need time. You have no time, I said. You have until the end of the business day. If the funds are not wired by 5:00, I will begin seizure proceedings. I will take this building. I will take your mansion. I will take your cars. I will take the shirt off your back. Ulysses, please, Leland begged. Tears began to form in his eyes. This is our legacy. My father built this company. Do not destroy us. We are family. Family. I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. Yesterday you told me I was not family. Yesterday you told me I was a charity case. Yesterday you made me sit at the end of the table. I walked back to my chair. I sat down. I spun around to face the window again, giving them my back. Get out of my office, I said. But Sir Bryce started. I said, Get out, I roared. Sloan stepped forward. Security, she said into her headset. Escort the guests out. 2 massive guards appeared at the door. They grabbed Leland and Bryce by the arms. Wait, Leland screamed as he was dragged away. Ulysses, let us talk. We can make a deal. I can give you the company. Just leave me the house. Please, I did not turn around. I listened to their screams fade down the hallway. When the doors closed, silence returned to the room. Sloan walked over to my desk. That was effective, sir, she said. It is not over, Sloan, I said, staring at the Pembroke Tower in the distance. They still have hope. They think they can find a lawyer. They think they can find a loophole. I turned the chair back around. Call the district attorney, I said. Send over the file on Bryce's embezzlement. It is time to open the second front. Sloan nodded and walked out. I sat there alone in the boardroom. I looked at my hands. They were steady. They had wanted a war with a peasant. They got a war with a king, and the king was taking no prisoners. The security guards did not drag them all the way to the street. I told Sloan to have them held in the lobby. I wanted the spectacle to continue. I wanted the grand finale to happen in the public eye, where the receptionists, the delivery drivers, and the cleaning staff could bear witness. I took the private elevator down. When the doors opened, the scene was exactly as I had predicted. Leland Pembroke was not leaving quietly. He was clinging to the reception desk like a barnacle clinging to the hull of a sinking ship. He was screaming. His face was a map of broken veins and desperate sweat. He was on his phone yelling into the receiver. "I want the police," he screamed. "I want the FBI. I have an intruder, a squatter. He has hacked our systems. He has falsified legal documents. Send everyone." He saw me step out of the elevator. His eyes lit up with a manic glee. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "There he is," he shouted into the phone. "That is the imposter. He is right here. Hurry up before he escapes." I walked across the marble floor of the lobby. My footsteps echoed sharply. I did not run. I did not look afraid. I stopped 10 feet away from him. I put my hands in my pockets and waited. Bryce was standing behind his father. He was looking at the floor. He knew something Leland did not. He had felt the power in my hands the night before. He knew that physical force was not going to work. But Leland was a man who had lived in a bubble of privilege for 65 years. He truly believed that the law existed to serve him. He believed that the police were his private security force. "You are finished," Ulysses Leland spat. He hung up the phone. "I just called the commissioner. We play golf together. He is sending a squad car. They are going to drag you out of here in handcuffs. You think you can steal my company with some fake papers and a cheap suit? You are delusional." I looked at the employees gathered by the elevators. They were whispering. They were watching the fall of their emperor. "You really believe that, do you, Leland?" I asked calmly. "You believe that a factory worker could hack a bank? You believe that a gardener could fake a deed that passed a notary inspection?" "I believe you are a con artist," Leland sneered. "I believe you are sick. You are a sad old man who could not handle being poor, so you invented a fantasy. Well, reality is coming through those doors in about 2 minutes. And when it does, I am going to press charges. I am going to sue you for everything you have. I will take your truck. I will take your cabin. I will take that fake watch off your wrist." He was so confident. He straightened his tie. He smoothed his hair. He was preparing his victory speech. He looked at the receptionist. "Martha," he barked, "get me a coffee and call my wife. Tell her we are going to be late for dinner, but everything is under control." Martha did not move. She looked at me. I gave her a small nod. She stayed seated. Leland looked around confused. "Why is no one listening to me?" he demanded. "I am the owner of this building." "Not anymore," I said softly. Just then the sirens wailed. Blue and red lights flashed against the glass revolving doors. 3 squad cars screeched to a halt at the curb. Leland smiled. It was a wide, predatory smile. "Here comes the cavalry," he said. "Goodbye, Ulysses." It was a nice try. The doors spun. 4 officers walked in. Leading them was not just a patrolman. It was Chief of Police Harrison. He was a big man with broad shoulders and a face carved from granite. He walked with a heavy, purposeful stride. His hand rested on his service weapon. Leland ran toward him. He practically threw himself at the chief. Chief Harrison Leland cried, "Thank God you are here. This man here, this black man. He broke into my office. He assaulted my son. He is trying to claim he owns the building. Arrest him immediately. He is dangerous." Leland pointed at me. He looked back at me with triumph in his eyes. He expected to see me running. He expected to see me begging. But I just stood there. I took a slow breath. Chief Harrison stopped. He looked at Leland. He looked at the finger pointing at me. He frowned. He reached out a massive hand and pushed Leland gently but firmly to the side. "Move, Mr. Pembroke," the chief rumbled. "You are blocking my line of sight." Leland stumbled back. "Excuse me," he sputtered. "I am the victim here." The chief ignored him. He walked straight toward me. He stopped 3 feet away. The lobby went silent. Everyone held their breath. Leland was grinning, expecting the handcuffs to come out. Then the chief did something that made the air leave Leland's lungs. He snapped his heels together. He straightened his back. He raised his hand in a sharp, crisp salute. "Colonel Mercer," the chief said. His voice was filled with deep, unwavering respect. I returned the salute casually. "At ease, Sergeant," I said. "It has been a long time." "It has, sir," the chief said, lowering his hand. "I saw the alert come through on the secure channel. I did not know you were active in the city. If I had known, I would have provided an escort. I prefer to work in the shadows, Harrison," I said. "You know that." Leland made a noise that sounded like a dying cat. He He walked forward, his hands shaking. "Colonel," he whispered. "What? What did you call him?" Chief Harrison turned to Leland. The warmth vanished from his eyes. He looked at Leland like he was something he had scraped off his boot. "I called him by his rank, Mr. Pembroke," the chief said. "This is Colonel Ulysses Mercer, retired from military intelligence, special operations, the man who trained half the officers in this precinct, including me." Leland shook his head. No, that is impossible. He is a factory worker. He worked at the auto plant." "That was his cover," the chief said. "And if he was working a cover, it means he was doing something important. And if he has dropped his cover, it means you are in very serious trouble." Leland looked at me. The reality was crashing down on him. The years of me playing the fool, the years of me sitting quietly while he mocked me. It was all a game, and he had been the pawn. "You knew," Bryce whispered. He looked at the chief. "You knew who he was." "Everyone who matters knows who he is," the chief said. "Colonel Mercer is a legend." I stepped forward. I closed the distance between myself and Leland. "You called the police?" "Leland," I said. "You wanted the law involved." "Well, here is the law. But the law deals in facts, and I have some facts for you." I signaled to Sloane, who was standing by the elevator. She walked over and handed me a thick black binder. I opened it. "You accused me of fraud," I said. "You said I was a con artist. But let us look at who the real criminal is." I pulled out a document. I held it up for the chief to see. "This is a forensic audit of Pembroke real estate," I said loudly so the employees could hear. "It details 15 years of systematic tax evasion. It shows offshore accounts in Panama and the Cayman Islands. It shows money laundering for organized crime syndicates to hide construction kickbacks." Leland went pale. His knees buckled. "That is private corporate data," he gasped. "You cannot show that. That is stolen." "It is not stolen if I own the company," I said coldly. "As the majority creditor and now the owner of the debt, I have the right to audit my own books. And what I found, Leland, is enough to put you in federal prison for the rest of your natural life." I turned the page. "And here is the evidence of bribery." I continued. "Payments to zoning inspectors. Payments to city council members. You built your empire on rot, Leland. You thought you were untouchable because you had money. But you forgot that every dollar leaves a trail. And I am the best hunter in the world." I snapped the binder shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I handed the binder to Chief Harrison. "Take this," I said. "It is all the evidence the district attorney will need. I want them booked for fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering." Chief Harrison took the binder. He nodded. "Yes, sir," he said. Leland fell to his knees. It was not a figure of speech. He physically collapsed onto the cold marble floor. He grabbed the leg of my trousers. "Ulysses, please," he sobbed. "I did not know. I swear I did not know. It was the accountants. It was a mistake. Do not do this. I am an old man. I cannot go to prison." I looked down at him. I looked at the top of his expensive haircut. I felt nothing. No pity. No joy. Just the cold satisfaction of a job done right. "You are not an old man, Leland," I said. "You are a criminal. And you are a bully. You threw wine at my daughter because you thought she was weak. You tried to steal my land because you thought I was stupid." I leaned down close to his ear. "I do not just own your debt," I whispered. "I own your freedom. I hold the power of life and death over your legacy. You are going to die in a cell, Leland, and you are going to die poor." I stood up and brushed his hand off my leg. "Get him out of my sight," I said to the chief. Chief Harrison signaled his men. 2 officers grabbed Leland by the arms and hauled him up. He was weeping openly now, snot running down his face, begging for mercy that was not coming. Bryce tried to run. He turned toward the revolving doors, but the other 2 officers were faster. They tackled him before he could take 3 steps. I watched as they were handcuffed. I watched as they were dragged out of the building they used to rule. I watched as the employees they had mistreated for years took out their phones and started filming. The chief lingered for a moment. "Is there anything else, Colonel?" he asked. "No, Harrison," I said. "Just make sure the press gets a good photo of them in the back of the squad car." "Will do, sir." The chief turned and walked away. I stood alone in the center of the lobby. The silence returned. The employees were staring at me. They looked scared. They did not know what kind of boss I would be. I looked at Martha, the receptionist. "What is your salary, Martha?" I asked. She swallowed hard. 40,000 a year, sir. Make it 60, I said. And tell everyone to get back to work. We have a lot of cleaning up to do. Martha smiled. It was a genuine smile. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I turned and walked back to the elevator. I had taken their money. I had taken their freedom. But I was not done yet. There was one final piece of the puzzle, one final humiliation to ensure that the name Pembroke never rose from the ashes again. I pressed the button for the penthouse. The doors closed. The denial was over. Now came the acceptance. And for them, acceptance was going to be a very bitter pill to swallow. The legal machinery of Mercer Holdings moved faster than a striking cobra. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon that afternoon, the Pembroke estate was no longer a home. It was a crime scene. It was a seized asset. It was a carcass being picked clean by the vultures of justice. I watched from the tinted window of my Phantom parked a safe distance away on the winding road that overlooked the valley. I did not need to be close to smell the fear. I could see the flashing lights of the sheriff's department. They were not the blue and red lights of emergency. They were the yellow amber lights of enforcement. A convoy of trucks had blocked the massive iron gates. These were not moving vans. These were asset recovery units. Men in gray uniforms moved with military precision. They carried clipboards and rolls of neon orange tape. They were not there to pack boxes with bubble wrap. They were there to tag catalog and remove. I saw the head of the enforcement team cut the padlock on the main gate. The Pembroke crest, that iron symbol of their arrogance, swung open with a screech of rusty metal. The trucks rumbled up the driveway. They looked like tanks invading a fallen city. Inside the house, the staff was in a panic. I had received a text from Martha, the receptionist, who had called the housekeeper. She told me the maids were crying not because they were sad for the Pembrokes, but because they were afraid they would not get paid. I sent a reply immediately telling Martha to assure them that Mercer Holdings would cover all back wages. I was not a monster. I did not punish the innocent for the sins of the guilty. But for the guilty there was no mercy. I saw the deputies pasting notices on the front door. Large, bright paper that screamed eviction and seized. They were like scarlet letters branded onto the mahogany wood. The neighbors were starting to gather. The doctors and lawyers and CEOs who lived in the surrounding mansions stood at the ends of their driveways. They held glasses of wine. They whispered. They pointed. In this world, social death was far worse than physical death, and the Pembrokes were dying a very public death. I saw the repo men hook up the cars, the Bentley, the Mercedes, the vintage Jaguar Leland loved more than his own son. One by one they were dragged up onto the flatbeds. The sound of their tires screeching against the asphalt was the only protest they could offer. Then came the climax of the afternoon. A taxi pulled up to the gate. The door opened and Bryce stumbled out. He had been released on bail pending his hearing, likely paid for by the last scraps of credit he could find, or perhaps a loan from a foolish friend. He looked like a ghost. His suit was torn, his nose was bandaged, his hands were shaking. He ran up the driveway. He tried to stop the tow truck driver who was securing the Bentley. "Stop," he screamed. "That is my car. You cannot take that. My lawyer is calling the judge right now." The driver did not even look at him. He just kept ratcheting the strap down. Click, click, click. The sound of inevitability. Bryce ran to the front door. He tried to open it. It was locked. The locks had been changed an hour ago. He pounded on the wood. "Open the door," he howled. "I live here. This is my house." A deputy stepped forward. He was a large man with no patience for entitled rich boys. "Sir," the deputy said, his voice carrying in the cold air, "you need to step back. This property is under the control of the court receiver. If you do not leave the premises immediately, you will be arrested for trespassing." "Trespassing!" Bryce shrieked. "It is my name on the deed." "Not anymore," the deputy said. "Step back." Bryce collapsed on the front steps. He put his head in his hands. He was weeping. It was the weeping of a child who had his toys taken away. He did not care about the morality of what he had done. He only cared that he had lost. But the universe was not done with Bryce Pembroke yet. A bright red convertible screeched around the corner. It was a Porsche. I recognized it immediately from the surveillance photos. It belonged to the woman Bryce had been funding with my daughter's charity money. Her name was Tiffany. She was young, beautiful, and completely ruthless. She slammed the car into park right in the middle of the driveway, blocking the tow trucks. She jumped out. She was wearing a fur coat and sunglasses even though the sun was gone. She held a phone in her hand and she was filming. "Bryce," she screamed. Bryce looked up. For a second, hope flickered in his eyes. He thought she was there to save him. He thought she was there to comfort him. "Tiffany," he said, standing up. "Thank God. You have to help me. They are taking everything." Tiffany did not offer a hug. She marched up to him, her phone held high, the camera lens pointing directly at his battered face. "You liar," she yelled. "I went to the dealership today. I went to get the oil changed, and do you know what they told me? They told me the lease was canceled. They told me the car is reported stolen." Bryce stammered. "Tiffany, listen. It is a misunderstanding. My accounts are just frozen temporarily." "Temporary," she laughed. It was a cruel sound. "I saw the news, Bryce. You are broke. You are indicted. You are nothing." She got right in his face. The neighbors were watching. The deputies were watching. The tow truck drivers stopped working to watch, and the internet was watching too. I checked my tablet. She was live streaming on Instagram. 3,000 people were watching Bryce Pembroke beg. "I need the keys to the apartment," she demanded. "The penthouse you promised me. You said you bought it." I did not buy it yet," Bryce whispered. "I was going to. Next week." "You are a fraud," Tiffany screamed. "You wasted my time. You wasted my youth." Then she did it. She pulled back her hand. Her nails were long and manicured. She slapped him. It was not a slap of passion. It was a slap of disgust. It cracked across his face right over his broken nose. Bryce cried out and fell back onto the gravel. Tiffany stood over him. "Do not ever call me again," she said. She turned to her phone camera. She fixed her hair. "See that girl," she said to her followers. "That is what happens when you date a loser who lies about his money. Stay woke." She got back in her Porsche, revved the engine, and sped away, leaving Bryce lying in the dirt alone. I watched it all. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction in my chest. This was the balance of the universe correcting itself. He had humiliated Gabrielle in private. Now he was humiliated in front of the world. I tapped the partition glass. My driver lowered the window. "Sir," he asked. "Pour it," I said. The driver opened the small refrigerator console. He took out a bottle of wine. It was a Chateau Margaux, a vintage red, expensive, complex, deep crimson like blood. He poured a small amount into a crystal glass and handed it back to me. I took the glass. I held it up to the light. The liquid swirled rich and dark. I looked at the scene below. The house was dark. The cars were gone. The gates were broken. The man was broken. 24 hours ago, Leland Pembroke had held a glass just like this. He had used it as a weapon. He had used it to stain my daughter's face and her honor. He had thought that wine was a symbol of his power and our poverty. Now the tables had turned. I rolled the window down. The cold air rushed in. I could smell the coming winter. I looked at Bryce one last time. He was still sitting on the gravel, pulling his knees to his chest, rocking back and forth. He had no coat. He had no home. He had no wife. He had no mistress. He was stripped bare. "To respect," I whispered. I did not drink the wine. I tipped the glass out the window. The red liquid fell through the air. It splashed onto the asphalt of the road. A libation for the gods of justice. A cleansing of the stain. I placed the empty glass on the seat beside me. "Drive," I said. The Phantom moved forward silently. We glided past the scene of destruction. We drove past the neighbors who were too busy gossiping to notice the black car with the tinted windows. As we drove away, I checked the rear-view mirror. The Pembroke estate shrank in the distance until it was just a dark smudge against the twilight. They had lost everything. Their money, their reputation, their freedom. But as I watched the darkness swallow them up, a thought occurred to me. A small nagging instinct that had kept me alive in war zones and boardrooms for 40 years. A rat is most dangerous when it is cornered. Bryce was broken. He was a coward. He would likely curl up and die of shame. But Leland was different. Leland was old school. He had built that empire with his own hands, even if those hands were dirty. He had pride. And I had not just hurt his pride, I had executed it. I had seen the look in his eyes as the police dragged him away. It was not just fear, it was hate, pure distilled hatred. He would make bail. Men like him always had a hidden stash somewhere, a favor he could call in, a lawyer who worked for IOS. He would come for me, or worse, he would come for Gabrielle. I picked up my phone. "Sloan," I said. "Sir." "Increase the security detail on Gabrielle," I said. and put a tail on Leland the second he makes bail. I want to know when he eats, when he sleeps, and when he uses the bathroom." "You think he will try something?" Sloan asked. "He has nothing left to lose," I said. "And a man with nothing to lose is the only thing dangerous enough to threaten a man who has everything." I looked out at the city lights. The war was won, but the battle for survival was never truly over. Let him come, I thought. Let him try. I had taken his house. I had taken his company. If he came for my daughter again, I would take his life. I closed my eyes and let the smooth motion of the car carry me home. The wine was spilled, the debt was paid, but the account remained open just a crack, waiting for the final transaction. The neon sign of the Starlight Motel buzzed with a sound like an angry hornet. It flickered on and off, casting a sickly green light into the room where the former kings of real estate were hiding. Room number 12 smelled of stale cigarettes and regret. The carpet was sticky. The wallpaper was peeling. For Leland and Bryce Pembroke, this was not just a step down, it was a descent into hell. I watched them through the pinhole camera I had paid the motel manager $50 to install an hour before they checked in. I sat in my study miles away, nursing a glass of water and watching the rats turn on each other. Leland was pacing the small room. He had taken off his tie. His white shirt was stained with sweat. He looked like a man who had been running for days. Bryce was sitting on the edge of the sagging mattress. He was holding a bag of ice to his face. His nose was purple and swollen from where I had hit him and where Tiffany had slapped him. "This is your fault," Leland screamed. He kicked the cheap particle board dresser. The drawer fell out with a clatter. "You and your women, you and your gambling. If you had just kept your head down, we would still be in the mansion." "My fault," Bryce mumbled through his swollen lips. "You were the one who insulted him. You were the one who threw the wine. You started the war, Dad. I just got caught in the crossfire." "Shut up," Leland roared. He grabbed a lamp and threw it against the wall. It shattered. "We are not finished. Do you hear me? We are Pembrokes. We do not lose to the help." He stopped pacing. He looked at Bryce with a look of madness. "He has evidence," Leland said. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "He showed that binder to the police, but he did not give them everything. He kept the originals. I know men like him. They keep the leverage close." Where Bryce asked, "Where would he keep it?" "In that cabin," Leland said. "In that barn out back, the one he keeps locked. That is where he hides it. The tax records, the offshore account numbers. If we destroy that binder, we destroy the case. Without the physical evidence, it is just hearsay." Bryce looked at his father. "You want to break in? He is dangerous, Dad. You saw what he did to me. I am not talking about breaking in," Leland said. His eyes were wide and wild. "I am talking about burning it down." I watched on my screen as the plan formed in the air between them. It was a desperate, stupid plan born of panic. They thought fire could erase their sins. They thought that if they burned my barn, they would burn away the truth. "I need you to call Razor," Leland said. Razor, Bryce asked. "The drug dealer. The one I owe money to." "Call him," Leland ordered. "Tell him I will pay him double what you owe. Tell him I have a job for him. A simple job. 1 match. 1 gallon of gasoline." I leaned back in my chair. I could have called the police right then. I could have recorded the conspiracy to commit arson. But I did not. I wanted to see how far they would go. I wanted to see them dig their own graves. 2 hours later, a black van pulled up to the edge of my property. It parked in the shadows of the tree line. I switched my monitor to the perimeter cameras. 3 men stepped out of the van. They were dressed in dark clothing. They moved with the swagger of men who enjoyed violence. Leading them was a man I recognized from my intelligence reports. Razor, a mid-level enforcer for the local syndicate. He was big, mean, and not very smart. Leland and Bryce were waiting in their rental car down the road. They were too cowardly to do the dirty work themselves. They watched from a distance as their hired muscle approached my fence. I did not turn on the floodlights. I did not release the dogs. I let them come. Razor and his 2 goons cut the wire fence. They walked through the tall grass carrying red gasoline cans. The smell of fuel drifted on the wind. They headed straight for the barn where I kept the Rolls-Royce in my archives. They reached the barn door. Razor pulled out a crowbar. He was about to pry the lock when he stopped. He shone his flashlight on the door. There was a sign there. It was small. It was brass. It was not a warning about dogs or guns. It was a unit insignia. The insignia of the 75th Ranger Regiment, and below it was a name engraved in steel. Colonel U. Mercer. Razor froze. He lowered the flashlight. He looked at the sign. Then he looked at the barn. Then he looked at the perimeter of the woods. "Wait," he hissed to his men. "What is it, boss?" one of the goons asked. "Let us light it up." Razor grabbed the goon by the collar and slammed him against the barn wall. "Can you not read?" Razor whispered, his voice trembling. "That says Mercer. Ulysses Mercer." So what the goon asked. So what Razor hissed. "My uncle served with Mercer in Panama. He told me stories. This is not a factory worker. This is the Grim Reaper. We are standing on a kill box." Razor looked around frantically. He realized suddenly that the silence of the woods was not natural. He realized that a man like Mercer would have known they were there 10 minutes ago. "Drop the cans," Razor ordered. "We are leaving, now, but we got paid," the goon protested. "We give the money back," Razor said. "I am not dying for a couple of $1,000. Move." They turned to run, but as they ran back toward the road, they saw headlights approaching. It was the rental car. Leland and Bryce had driven up to check on the progress. They were impatient. Bryce rolled down the window. "Why are you stopping?" he yelled. "Why is there no fire? Do it! Burn it down!" Razor stopped running. He looked at Bryce. He looked at the man who had sent him into a death trap without a warning. "You set us up," Razor said, walking toward the car. "What?" Bryce stammered. "No. Just do the job." Razor reached through the open window. He grabbed Bryce by his tie and dragged him halfway out of the car. "You sent me to hit a colonel," Razor shouted. "You sent me to hit the ghost. Did you want me to die?" "I did not know," Bryce screamed. "Let go of me." Razor did not let go. He opened the car door and pulled Bryce out onto the dirt road. Bryce scrambled, trying to get away, but Razor was faster and much stronger. "You owe me for the risk," Razor growled. He raised his heavy boot. "No, please," Bryce begged. "Not the face." Razor did not aim for the face. He aimed lower. He stomped down hard on Bryce's right leg just above the ankle. The sound was like a dry branch snapping in winter. Bryce screamed. It was a high-pitched sound that tore through the night. He rolled in the dirt, clutching his leg. Leland sat in the driver's seat, paralyzed with fear. He locked the doors. He did not get out to help his son. He just stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel. Razor leaned into the window and looked at Leland. "Tell the colonel we did not know," Razor said. "Tell him we are sorry, and tell him we handled the trash for him." Razor spit on the windshield. He signaled his men. They ran back to their van and sped away, leaving only dust and the smell of fear behind. I watched it all from my study. I took a sip of my water. I picked up the microphone that was connected to the external speakers on the barn. "Leland," I said. My voice boomed through the trees, amplified and godlike. Leland jumped in his seat. He looked around wildly. "You have 10 seconds to get off my property," I said, "or the next thing that snaps will not be a leg." Leland did not hesitate. He did not look at his screaming son lying in the dirt. He slammed the car into reverse. He backed up wildly, hitting a fence post. Then he shifted into drive and floored it. He left Bryce there. He left his own son writhing in agony on the cold ground with a broken leg. I watched the taillights disappear. I sighed. I stood up and walked to the door. I could not leave Bryce there. I was not a monster. I walked out into the night. My dogs trotted beside me. Bryce was sobbing. He looked up and saw me standing over him. I was silhouetted against the moon. "Please," he whispered. "Please help me." He left me. He just left me. I looked down at him. "I know," I said. "That is who he is, Bryce. That is who he has always been." I took out my phone. I dialed 911. "I have a trespasser on my property," I told the operator. "He appears to have fallen and injured his leg. Send an ambulance. And send the police." I hung up. I crouched down next to Bryce. "You tried to burn my house down," I said softly. "I am sorry," Bryce wept. "I am so sorry. I did not want to. He made me." I stood up. "Violence is a tool, Bryce," I said. "But if you do not know how to use it, it will always turn around and hurt you." I turned and walked back to the cabin. I left him waiting for the sirens. The fire never started. The secrets were safe. And the Pembroke family was not just broken financially. They were broken by blood. A father who abandoned his son. A son who betrayed his father. The trap was closing, and there was nowhere left to run. I watched the GPS tracker on my tablet moving rapidly across the map. The red dot representing Leland Pembroke was not heading to the hospital. It was not heading to the police station to confess. It was heading to a storage facility on the outskirts of town and then straight toward the old private airfield near the coast. I sat in my study, a glass of water in my hand, shaking my head. A father with any shred of humanity would have turned the car around. He would have crawled back to my gate on his hands and knees to beg for help for his injured son. Bryce was lying in the dirt with a broken leg, screaming in pain until the ambulance I called arrived. But Leland did not care. In his mind, Bryce was already a casualty of war. Bryce was dead weight, and Leland Pembroke was a survivor. The camera feed from the motel room showed me what he had done before he fled. He had returned there for exactly 3 minutes, just long enough to rip open the lining of his suitcase and pull out bundles of cash. It was his emergency fund, his getaway money. He did not leave a single dollar for his son. He did not leave a note. He took the cash, he took his passport, and he ran. I picked up my phone. "Sloan," I said. "I am tracking him, sir," Sloan replied. "He is heading to the Northfield airstrip. We have intercepted a call he made to a private charter pilot. He offered the man $50,000 for a flight to Belize. Is the pilot compliant?" I asked. "The pilot is one of ours," Sloan said. "We bought the charter company an hour ago. The plane is on the tarmac, but the engines are cold." "Good," I said. "Let him get all the way to the steps. I want him to taste freedom before we snatch it away." I stood up. I walked out to the Rolls-Royce. My driver held the door open. "To the airfield," I said, "and drive fast. I do not want to miss the departure." The drive took 20 minutes. The night was pitch black. The airfield was a desolate stretch of cracked concrete surrounded by tall weeds. There were no lights except for a single strobe on top of a small hangar. The wind was howling, coming off the ocean, carrying the smell of salt and jet fuel. I saw Leland's rental car parked haphazardly near the fence. The driver's door was open. He had abandoned it in his haste. I saw him running across the tarmac. He was struggling with a heavy duffel bag. His suit jacket was flapping in the wind. He looked like a madman. He was running toward a small twin-engine Cessna parked at the end of the runway. He reached the plane. He pounded on the door. "Open up!" he screamed over the wind. "I am here. I have the money. Let us go." The door of the plane did not open. The propeller did not spin. The cockpit remained dark. Leland backed away. He looked around frantically. "Hello," he shouted. "Is anyone there?" We had a deal. Suddenly, floodlights snapped on. 4 massive banks of LEDs mounted on trucks surrounding the plane illuminated the tarmac. The light was blinding. It turned the night into a harsh, sterile white day. Leland screamed and covered his eyes. He dropped the bag of money. It unzipped, spilling stacks of $100 bills onto the concrete. The wind caught a few of them, sending them tumbling away into the darkness like dead leaves. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked slowly into the circle of light. The wind whipped my tie, but I did not flinch. I walked until I was 10 feet away from him. "Going somewhere, Leland?" I asked. Leland lowered his hands. He squinted at me. When he saw who it was, his shoulders slumped. He looked at the plane, then back at me. "You," he whispered. "You are everywhere." "I own the plane, Leland," I said. "I own the fuel. I own the asphalt you are standing on. There is no escape. The FBI is 5 minutes away. They have the audit. They have the witness statements. You are going to die in a federal prison." Leland fell to his knees. He grabbed a handful of cash from the ground. "Take it," he cried, holding the money out to me. "There is 200,000 here. Take it all. Just let me go. I have a boat waiting in Mexico. I just need to get there. Please, Ulysses, we are both fathers. Show some mercy." I looked at the money, then I looked at him with disgust. "We are not both fathers," I said coldly. "A father protects his children. I called an ambulance for your son tonight because you left him to rot. You broke his leg and then you ran away. You are not a father. You are a parasite." Leland dropped the money. He realized bribery would not work. His eyes darted around looking for a new angle. looking for a new victim to throw under the bus. It was not my idea, he blurted out. I raised an eyebrow. What was not your idea? I asked. The fraud, Leland said, speaking faster and faster. The embezzlement, the offshore accounts. It was Bryce. It was all Bryce. He is the one with the gambling problem. He is the one who needed the money. I just signed the papers. I was trying to protect him. I am an old man Ulysses. I do not know how to use computers. Bryce set it all up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a digital voice recorder. I pressed the red button. Say that again, I said. Leland looked at the recorder. He saw it as a lifeline. He saw a chance to trade his son's life for his own freedom. If I tell you the truth, he asked, his voice trembling, will you let me go? Will you let me get on that plane? I looked at him. I did not smile. I did not promise. I just held out the recorder. The truth is the only currency I accept, I said. Leland scrambled to his feet. He leaned into the recorder. He spoke clearly and loudly, desperate to be heard. It was Bryce Pembroke, he said. My son. He masterminded the entire scheme. He forged my signature on the tax returns. He set up the shell companies in Panama. He stole the money from the charity. He forced me to go along with it. He threatened to expose me if I did not help him. I am innocent. I am a victim of elder abuse. Bryce is the criminal. He is the one you want. He paused for breath. Then he added the final nail in the coffin. And the arson tonight. He ordered those men to burn your barn. I tried to stop him. I begged him not to do it, but he was out of control. He is dangerous. I clicked the stop button on the recorder. I had it. The confession, the betrayal, it was complete. He had sold his own blood for a seat on a plane that was never going to take off. Thank you, Leland, I said. I put the recorder back in my pocket. Now let me go, Leland pleaded. Give me the key. Let me fly away. I gave you what you wanted. I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a single piece of paper. It was folded neatly. Here, I said, your ticket. Leland snatched the paper from my hand. He unfolded it with shaking fingers. He expected a boarding pass. He expected a flight plan. Instead, he stared at a printout of a text message. It was a message from me to the FBI sent 5 minutes ago. It read, subject located at Northfield Airfield. Confession secured. Move in. Leland looked up at me. His face went white. You lied, he whispered. I am a businessman, Leland, I said. I make deals, but I never said I would let you get on the plane. I said I wanted the truth. And you just gave it to me. But I gave you Bryce, he screamed. I gave you my son. Yes, I said, stepping back as sirens began to wail in the distance. You did. And that is why you deserve what is coming. A man who sells his son is lower than dirt. Leland lunged at me. He tried to grab my throat. You bastard, he shrieked. You tricked me. I did not even take my hands out of my pockets. I simply stepped to the side. Leland stumbled past me and tripped over his own duffel bag. He fell face first onto the concrete. Before he could get up, 4 black SUVs tore onto the tarmac. Men in tactical gear poured out. They had rifles. They had vests that said FBI in bright yellow letters. Leland curled into a ball. He covered his head with his hands. Do not shoot, he sobbed. I am unarmed. I am cooperating. I watched as they zip-tied his hands behind his back. I watched as they hauled him up. He looked at me one last time. There was no hate in his eyes anymore, only emptiness. He was a hollow shell of a man. I turned my back on him. I walked toward my car. The wind was still howling, but now it felt clean. It felt like it was blowing away the stench of the Pembroke corruption. I got into the back seat of the Rolls-Royce. Did you get it? Sir Sloane asked from the front seat. I tapped my pocket where the recorder sat. I got it, I said. He sang like a bird. He buried Bryce so deep he will never see the sun again, and in doing so, he buried himself. What do we do with the recording, she asked. We keep it, I said. We save it for the trial, and we play it for Bryce. I want him to hear his father's voice sending him to prison. I want him to know that in the end he was worth nothing to the man he tried so hard to impress. Drive, I said. The car pulled away, leaving the flashing lights and the screaming man behind. It was brutal. It was cold. But it was necessary. I took out my phone and looked at a picture of Gabrielle. I had promised to protect her. And tonight I had removed the last threat. The Pembroke dynasty was dead. And I was the one who had dug the grave. But the night was not over. There was still one act left to play. The public reckoning. The moment where the truth would be laid bare, not just for the law, but for the soul of my family. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me home. I was tired. But it was a good tired. the kind of tired that comes after a long, hard fight that you know you have won. The boardroom of Pembroke Real Estate had seen many predators in its 40-year history. It had seen hostile takeovers and ruthless negotiations, but it had never seen a slaughter like the one that was about to happen. I sat at the head of the table. The obsidian surface reflected my face, calm and impassive. Around me sat the 20 members of the board of directors. These were men and women who had worshipped Leland Pembroke when the stock was high and who were now ready to eat his corpse to save their own dividends. The room was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning, which was finally working again now that I owned the building. Everyone was waiting. We were not waiting for a financial report. We were waiting for the last remnant of the old regime. The double doors swung open. Bryce Pembroke entered the room. He looked nothing like the arrogant prince who had laughed at me on Thanksgiving. He was a broken thing. His right leg was encased in a heavy plaster cast from his ankle to his knee. He was leaning heavily on a pair of aluminum crutches. Click-drag, click-drag. The sound was pathetic in the vast quiet of the room. His nose was still bandaged. His face was pale and unshaven. He was wearing a suit that was clearly bought off the rack at a discount store because all his bespoke clothing had been seized by the repo men. He hobbled to the other end of the table. He gripped the back of a chair to steady himself. He looked around the room, searching for a friendly face. He found none. The board members looked down at their tablets or out the window. They smelled the failure on him. Bryce cleared his throat. It was a wet, raspy sound. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," he began, his voice shaking. "Thank you for meeting with me. I know things look bad. I know my father has been arrested. It is a tragedy. But I want to assure you that I am here to take control. I am here to steer this ship out of the storm." I leaned back in my chair. I laced my fingers together. I watched him lie. It was fascinating in a morbid way. He actually believed he still had a chance. He believed that because his father was gone, he automatically inherited the throne. My father made mistakes. Bryce continued, gaining a little confidence. He was old. He made bad judgments. But I am not my father. I represent the future of Pembroke Real Estate. I have a vision. And with your support, I can rebuild our reputation. I ask you to reinstate me as CEO, effective immediately. He smiled. It was a gruesome, desperate smile. I did not speak. I simply nodded to the side of the room. The side door opened. Gabrielle walked in. The air in the room changed instantly. If Bryce looked like a beggar, Gabrielle looked like a queen. She was wearing a white suit, sharp and tailored. Her hair was pulled back, revealing her face. There was no bruise visible anymore, only the steel in her eyes. She did not look at me. She walked straight to the podium that stood next to the screen. Bryce's smile faltered. "Gabrielle," he stammered. "Honey, what are you doing here? This is a business meeting. You should go home." Gabrielle looked at him. She did not see a husband. She saw a stranger. "I am home, Bryce," she said. Her voice was clear and amplified by the microphone. "This company was built on fraud. And today we are cleaning house." She pressed a button on the console. The huge screen behind her lit up. It did not show a spreadsheet. It showed a sound wave file. Bryce looked confused. "What is this?" he asked. "The truth," Gabrielle said. She pressed play. The voice that filled the room was unmistakable. It was Leland Pembroke screaming over the wind of an airfield. It was the recording I had made the night before. It was Bryce Pembroke. Leland's voice boomed, distortion and all. My son. He masterminded the entire scheme. He forged my signature. He stole the money. He forced me to go along with it. Bryce dropped one of his crutches. It clattered loudly to the floor. He gripped the table with both hands, his face draining of blood. "That is a lie," he shouted. "That is fake. My father would never say that." The recording continued. "He is the criminal," Leland's voice said. "He is the one you want. He even ordered those men to burn your barn. I begged him not to do it." Gabrielle paused the recording. The silence in the room was heavier than before. The board members were staring at Bryce with open disgust. A father selling out his son. A son trying to blame his father. It was a snake pit. Bryce was shaking his head back and forth. "No," he whispered. "No, he threw me under the bus. He left me in the dirt, and then he blamed me." Gabrielle stepped forward. She was not done. "Your father is a liar, Bryce," she said. "We know he was involved, but he was telling the truth about one thing. You are a thief." She pressed another button. The screen changed. It was a series of bank statements. This is the account for the Mercer family. Charity, Gabrielle said, pointing to the screen. And these are the withdrawals made by Bryce Pembroke. Over $500,000 stolen from orphans and homeless shelters. Bryce looked like he was going to vomit. He tried to speak, but no words came out. And what did you spend it on? Gabrielle asked. Did you invest it? Did you save it? No. She clicked the remote again. Photos appeared. Dozens of them. Bryce at the casino. Bryce on a yacht with Tiffany. Bryce handing cash to bookies. And finally a video clip. It was the video of Bryce laughing with his friends at a bar. She is my golden goose, Bryce said in the video, his face flushed with alcohol. As long as I keep her happy, I never have to work a day in my life. She is pathetic, really, but her checkbook is amazing. A collective gasp went through the room. Bryce looked at the screen. He saw his own soul laid bare. He saw the end of his charade. Gabrielle turned off the screen. The room went dark for a second before the lights came back up. She walked over to where Bryce was standing. She stood 2 feet away from him. She was close enough to smell his fear. You called me pathetic, she said softly. You called me a goose. You thought you could use me and throw me away. Bryce looked at her. Tears were streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat. Gabrielle, please, he whispered. I was drunk. I did not mean it. We can fix this. I love you. Gabrielle reached into her purse. She pulled out a thick envelope. She slapped it onto the chest of his cheap suit. You do not love anyone but yourself, Bryce, she said. These are divorce papers. I filed them this morning. Bryce tried to grab her hand. Gabrielle, I need you. I have nothing. Gabrielle pulled her hand away as if he were burning hot. You are right, she said. You have nothing. I have frozen the joint accounts. I have invoked the morality clause in our prenuptial agreement. You get nothing. No alimony, no settlement, no house. She looked him up and down. And I am taking my name back, she said. I am not Mrs. Pembroke. That name stands for cowardice. I am Ms. Mercer, and this company is now under Mercer management. She turned to the board. I move that we remove Bryce Pembroke from all positions of authority immediately, she said. All in favor. Every single hand in the room went up, even the hands of men Bryce had known since he was a child. Bryce looked around the room. He saw the sea of raised hands. It looked like a forest of judgment. He looked at me at the head of the table. Ulysses, he begged, help me. You are a man of honor. Do not let them do this. I stood up slowly. I buttoned my jacket. Honor is earned. Bryce, I said, you have spent your life spending credit you did not have. Now the bill is due. I looked at the security guards by the door. Remove him, I said. The guard stepped forward. Bryce tried to back away, but his crutch slipped on the polished floor. He fell hard, landing on his broken leg. He screamed in pain. No one moved to help him. The guards grabbed him by the arms. They dragged him up. He was sobbing now, a broken, ruined man. Gabrielle, he screamed as they dragged him toward the door. Daddy, someone help me. Gabrielle did not turn around. She stood tall, watching the screen where the Mercer logo had just replaced the Pembroke crest. When the doors slammed shut, cutting off his screams, the room felt cleaner. The infection had been removed. I looked at my daughter. She was trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally cutting the cord. I walked over to her. I put a hand on her shoulder. It is done, I said softly. Gabrielle looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. He has nothing left, she whispered. No, I said. He has his life, which is more than he deserves. But he has lost the things that mattered to him. He has lost the audience. I turned to the board of directors. They were looking at us nervously, wondering if they were next. Gentlemen, I said, and ladies, today is a new day. The Pembroke era is over. We will rebuild this company. But we will rebuild it on transparency. We will rebuild it on hard work. And anyone who has a problem with that can follow Mr. Pembroke out the door right now. No one moved. Good, I said. I looked out the window at the city below. Somewhere down there on the street, Bryce was being thrown out onto the pavement. He had no car. He had no money. He had no father to bail him out. He had no wife to comfort him. He was finally exactly what he had called me, a nobody. But unlike me, he did not have the strength to rise from the ashes. The public trial was over. The verdict was guilty. And the sentence was a lifetime of irrelevance. Now there was only the legal formality left. The prison cells were waiting, and I intended to make sure they were very small and very cold. The elevator ride down from the boardroom was silent, but it was a heavy silence. It was the kind of silence that happens after a bomb has gone off and the dust is settling. Gabrielle stood next to me. She was holding her head high, but I could see the tremor in her hands. She had just dismantled her entire life in front of 20 strangers. She had just cut out a cancer that had been growing in her heart for years. When the elevator doors opened into the main lobby, the scene was chaotic. The quiet dignity of the Pembroke Tower had been replaced by the sharp efficiency of federal law enforcement. The FBI agents I had summoned were everywhere. They were wearing blue windbreakers with yellow lettering. They were carrying boxes of files. They were securing the perimeter. And in the center of the room, the final act of this tragedy was playing out. Bryce Pembroke was sitting on a bench near the security desk. He was slumped over, clutching his broken leg. He looked like a discarded marionette whose strings had been cut. He was weeping softly, a sound that was lost in the bustle of the agents. But then the revolving doors spun and the main attraction arrived. 2 agents marched Leland Pembroke into the lobby. He was still wearing the disheveled suit from the airfield. His hands were zip-tied behind his back. He looked wild. His hair was standing up in tufts. His eyes were darting around the room looking for an exit that did not exist. When he saw Bryce sitting on the bench, he stopped. He tried to lunge toward his son, not to hug him, but to scream at him. "You did this!" Leland shouted, his voice cracking. "You told them everything! You weak little coward!" Bryce looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. "You left me!" Bryce screamed back. "You left me in the dirt with a broken leg and you ran away with the money. Do not talk to me about cowardice." The agent shoved Leland forward, forcing him to sit on the bench next to his son. It was a poetic image. The father and the son united in greed and now united in captivity. I stepped out of the elevator. Gabrielle walked beside me. Our footsteps echoed on the marble floor. The sound cut through the noise of the lobby. The agent saw me and nodded. They knew who I was. They knew I was the architect of this takedown. I walked until I was standing 5 feet away from the bench. I looked down at the 2 men who had ruled this city, or thought they did. Leland looked up at me, his face twisted with a mixture of hatred and confusion. Why he rasped. I waited. I let the question hang in the air. "Why did you do it?" Leland asked. "Why the charade? Why the old truck? Why the cheap clothes? If you had just told us who you were in the beginning, none of this would have happened. We would have respected you. We would have welcomed you. We would have been partners." Bryce nodded eagerly, wiping snot from his nose. "Yes," he whined. "If we knew you were rich, Ulysses, we would have treated you like a king. We would have given you the head of the table." I felt a cold laugh building in my chest, but I suppressed it. I looked at Gabrielle. She was watching them with a look of absolute pity. I took a step closer. I wanted them to hear every word. I wanted this lesson to be burned into their brains for the long, cold nights they were about to spend in a cell. "You think my money is who I am?" I asked, my voice low and steady. "Of course," Leland spat. "Money is everything. Money is power. Money is respect. If you hide your money, you are hiding your worth. You trapped us. You acted like a peasant to trick us into treating you like one." I shook my head slowly. "I did not trick you, Leland," I said. "I gave you a test." I looked around the lobby. The receptionists, the security guards, the FBI agents, they were all listening. "When my wife Esther died, I made a promise," I said. "I promised that I would live a life of truth. In my world, in the world of high finance and black operations, everyone wears a mask. Everyone wants something. I wanted to know if there was anyone left who valued a man for his soul, not his wallet." I looked at Bryce. "When Gabrielle brought you home, I did not check your bank account," I said. "I checked your eyes. I checked how you held the door for her. I checked how you spoke to the waiter. I saw the cracks even then. But I thought maybe you just needed guidance. I thought maybe if I showed you kindness, you would return it. I gave you a father-in-law who was humble," I continued. "I gave you a father-in-law who fixed your fence and mowed your lawn. I gave you the opportunity to show decency to a man who could offer you nothing but his time and his wisdom." "And what did you do?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "You mocked me. You made me eat in the kitchen. You laughed at my clothes. You treated me like a stray dog that you wished would just go away." "That is because you looked like a nobody," Bryce muttered. "I am a nobody," I roared. The shout echoed off the high ceiling. Bryce flinched. I am a nobody, I said, quieter now but with more intensity. Without my money, I am just a man, and that is the point. If you cannot respect the janitor, you do not deserve the respect of the CEO. I turned to Leland. You say you would have treated me like a king if you knew I was rich, I said. I believe you. You would have kissed my ring. You would have laughed at my bad jokes. You would have poured me the expensive wine instead of throwing it at my daughter. But that is not respect, Leland, I said. That is transaction. That is prostitution. You do not love people. You love what they can do for you. I looked at Gabrielle. She was standing tall, her eyes shining with tears. My daughter fell in love with a mask, I said, pointing at Bryce. She thought you were a prince. But the moment the money stopped, the moment the lights went out, the mask fell off. And underneath, there was nothing but a frightened, greedy little boy. I turned back to them. I hid my identity not to trap you, I said. I hid it to give you a chance to be human. And you failed. You failed every single time. Leland looked down at his shoes. The fight had gone out of him. He knew I was right. He knew that his own character was the architect of his destruction. I signaled to the lead FBI agent. Get them out of here, I said. The air is bad enough in this city without them breathing it. The agents moved in. Stand up, the lead agent barked. Leland struggled to his feet. He looked old, truly old. The arrogance that had held his spine straight for decades was gone. He shuffled forward, his head bowed. Bryce tried to stand, but his leg gave out. 2 agents had to grab him under the armpits and drag him. Wait! Bryce screamed. My leg. You are hurting my leg. You should have thought about that before you sent men to burn down a house with people inside, the agent said unsympathetically. They marched them toward the exit. I watched them go. I watched the backs of their suits, the suits they thought made them superior. Now they were just costumes for a tragedy. They reached the revolving doors. Beyond the glass, I could see the police van waiting. Its back doors were open like a black mouth ready to swallow them. The press had arrived. Flash bulbs exploded like lightning storms. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Pembroke, is it true you stole from a charity? Bryce, did you really assault your wife? Leland tried to hide his face against his shoulder. Bryce just cried louder. I watched as the agents pushed them into the back of the van. The metal bench inside looked cold and hard. Bryce looked back one last time. Through the glass of the lobby doors, through the flashes of the cameras, he found my eyes. He mouthed one word. Please. I did not blink. I did not look away. I simply watched until the heavy metal doors of the van slammed shut. Bang! The sound was final. It was the sound of a book closing. The van drove away, followed by a convoy of police cars. The sirens wailed, fading into the distance. The lobby went quiet. The employees stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. I turned to Gabrielle. She was staring at the empty space where the van had been. Her face was pale. Are you okay? I asked gently. She took a deep breath. She smoothed the front of her white jacket. I do not know, she said honestly. I feel light, like I was carrying a backpack full of rocks and someone just cut the straps. But I also feel empty. I nodded. That is normal, baby girl, I said. You are mourning, not for him, but for the time you lost, for the love you thought you had. She looked at me. He really never loved me, did he? She asked. He only loved the idea of me, or what I could give him. I took her hand. It was cold, but her grip was strong. He was incapable of love, Gabrielle, I said. He was a hollow man. Do not mourn the empty space. Fill it. Fill it with the work you do. Fill it with the people who actually care about you. I looked around the lobby at the employees who were watching us. Fill it with this, I said, gesturing to the building. You have a lot of work to do, Ms. Mercer. This company needs a leader who knows the difference between price and value. Gabrielle looked around. She saw the receptionists, the security guards, the junior analysts. They were looking at her not with fear, but with hope. They knew she was the one who had exposed the corruption. They knew she was the one who had saved the ship from sinking. She straightened her shoulders. A little bit of color returned to her cheeks. You are right, she said. I have a meeting to finish. She squeezed my hand. Thank you, Daddy, she whispered, for saving me, even when I did not want to be saved. I kissed her forehead. That is what fathers do, I said. She turned and walked back toward the elevator. She walked with purpose. The click of her heels on the marble was a steady, rhythmic sound. She was not the victim anymore. She was the CEO. I watched her go until the elevator doors closed. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. My work here was done. The wolf had hunted. The flock was safe. I stepped out into the cool evening air. The city was moving on. Cars honked. People rushed to dinner. Life continued. I walked to my Rolls-Royce. My driver opened the door. "Where to, sir?" he asked. "Home," I said. "The cabin. I needed to feed the dogs. I needed to chop some wood. I needed to take off the suit and put on my flannel shirt. I was Ulysses Mercer, billionaire. But tonight, I just wanted to be Ulysses, the old man who lived in the woods, because the old man in the woods was the one who had won. He was the one who was real." As the car pulled away, I looked at the Pembroke Tower one last time. The lights were still on, but the rot was gone. Justice, I thought, is a heavy hammer, but sometimes it is the only tool that works. I closed my eyes and let the hum of the engine lull me into a restless peace. The legal verdict was in, but the verdict of the heart would take a little longer to heal, and I would be there for that too, every step of the way. The destruction of the Pembroke Empire was swift, but the cleanup was a long, slow grind. For the next 6 months, I did not spend much time in my cabin. I spent my days in the tower that used to bear their name, supervising the demolition of their legacy. The first thing to go was the sign. I stood on the sidewalk and watched as a crane lowered the massive gold letters PEMBROOKE from the top of the building. One by one, they were cut loose and lowered to the ground. When the letter P hit the concrete, it made a hollow clang like a bell tolling for a funeral. I had it melted down. I had all of them melted down. The gold was sold, and the proceeds went to the very charity Bryce had stolen from. It was a poetic justice that I enjoyed immensely. Inside the building, the atmosphere changed. The sycophants and yes-men who had enabled Leland and Bryce were fired. I did not give them severance packages. I gave them cardboard boxes and 10 minutes to clear their desks. In their place, we hired young, hungry professionals who cared about ethics. We rebranded the company. Pembroke Real Estate ceased to exist. In its place rose the Gabrielle Mercer Foundation. We pivoted the business model. We stopped building luxury condos for billionaires and started building affordable housing and community centers. We used the remaining assets of the Pembroke estate to fund shelters for victims of domestic abuse. Every brick we laid was a testament to the survival of my daughter. I watched Gabrielle during those months. I watched her shed the skin of the victim and grow a new layer of armor. In the beginning, she was hesitant. She second-guessed her decisions. She would look at me for approval every time she signed a check. But I did not give her the answers. I forced her to find them herself. I forced her to trust her gut. And slowly, day by day, the hesitation vanished. The soft-spoken girl who had cooked turkeys for ungrateful in-laws disappeared. In her place stood a CEO who could silence a boardroom with a single look. One evening, we were hosting a gala to celebrate the launch of the new foundation. The ballroom was filled with the city's elite, but this time they were not laughing at us. They were lining up to shake Gabrielle's hand. She looked magnificent in a black evening gown. She stood tall, her shoulders back, her head high. She was navigating the shark tank of high society with the grace of a predator. I stood by the bar drinking club soda, watching her work the room. I saw a man approach her. I recognized the type immediately. His name was Julian, a hedge fund manager with a reputation for charm and a bank account that was mostly smoke and mirrors. He was handsome in a slick, manufactured way. He had seen the news. He knew Gabrielle was single. He knew she controlled a massive fortune. He saw a lonely divorcee ripe for the picking. I watched him slide up to her. He flashed a bright white smile. He touched her arm gently, a gesture of false intimacy. "Gabrielle," he said, his voice smooth like oil. "You look stunning tonight. I can only imagine how hard this year has been for you. You must be exhausted carrying this weight all alone." I tensed up. My instinct was to step in. My instinct was to break his wrist for touching her. But I stayed where I was. I wanted to see how the new Gabrielle handled a wolf in sheep's clothing. Gabrielle did not pull away. She looked at his hand on her arm. Then she looked up at his face. Her expression was bored. "Hello, Julian," she said. Her voice was cool. "I just wanted to offer my support," Julian continued, leaning closer. "I know a thing or two about managing large assets. If you ever need an advisor or just someone to take you to dinner and help you forget your troubles, I am here. I think we could be a power couple, Gabrielle. You have the heart and I have the financial brain." He winked. It was the same arrogant wink Bryce used to give. Gabrielle smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "That is a generous offer, Julian," she said. "But I think you are mistaken about two things." "Oh," Julian asked, still smiling. "And what are those?" "First," she said, removing his hand from her arm as if it were a dead insect. "You assume I am looking for a partner. I am not. I just got rid of a parasite. I am not looking to adopt another one." Julian's smile faltered. "Excuse me," he said. And second, she continued, her voice sharpening. "You mentioned your financial brain. I ran a background check on everyone on the guest list tonight. I know your fund is down 40% this quarter. I know you are being investigated by the SEC for insider trading. And I know you are 3 months behind on your alimony payments to your second wife." Julian's face went pale. He looked around to see if anyone was listening. So Gabrielle said, stepping into his personal space, "You are not here to help me. You are here because you need a lifeboat. But I am not a lifeboat, Julian. I am the captain of this ship, and I do not allow stowaways." She took a sip of her champagne. "Now excuse me," she said, dismissing him. "I have real donors to speak to. Enjoy the appetizers, Julian. They are free, unlike your advice." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing there with his mouth open. I let out a low laugh. I raised my glass to her across the room. She caught my eye and winked. It was not an arrogant wink. It was a warrior-esque wink. She had learned well. She did not need me to protect her anymore. She had become the thing that nightmares are afraid of. Later that night, after the last guest had left, we stood on the balcony of the penthouse. The city lights twinkled below us. "You were brutal with Julian," I said. Gabrielle laughed. It was a genuine happy sound. "He reminded me of Bryce," she said. "The entitlement, the fake charm. I promised myself I would never fall for that again. I have a new standard now, Daddy." "And what is that?" I asked. "You," she said. "If a man cannot look me in the eye and tell me the truth, he does not get a seat at my table. And if he thinks my money is the most interesting thing about me, he can leave." I nodded. I was proud. But I was also tired. The war was over. The enemy was vanquished. My daughter was safe and strong. My mission was complete. "I think it is time," I said, looking out at the horizon. "Time for what?" Gabrielle asked. "Time for me to go home," I said. Gabrielle looked at me. "You are home, Daddy. You can live here. You can have the penthouse." I shook my head. "This is your world, Gabrielle. It is a world of glass and steel and contracts. I built it for you, but I do not belong in it. I belong in the woods. I belong with the silence." "But why?" she asked. "You have so much power now. You could run this city." I put my hand on her cheek. "Power is a heavy coat, baby girl," I said. "You wear it when it is cold. You wear it when you have to fight. But you do not wear it to bed. If you wear it too long, you forget what your own skin feels like. I wore the suit for you. I wore the watch for you. But under it all, I am just Ulysses. And Ulysses misses his dogs." Gabrielle hugged me. She held on tight. "Will you come visit?" she asked. "Every Sunday," I promised. "And you will come to the cabin. We will eat on paper plates. And we will not talk about money. We will talk about life." The next morning I packed my bag. I took off the bespoke Italian suit. I folded it carefully and put it in the back of the closet. I took off the Patek Philippe watch. I placed it in its velvet box and locked it in the safe. I put on my flannel shirt. It was soft and worn. It smelled of wood smoke and cedar. I put on my denim jeans and my old work boots. I looked in the mirror. The billionaire was gone. The simple old man looked back at me, but his eyes were lighter. The burden was gone. I walked out to the garage. The Rolls-Royce Phantom was parked there, shining under the lights. I walked past it. I went to my old Ford pickup truck. I patted the rusted hood like it was an old friend. I climbed in. The engine coughed and sputtered before roaring to life. It was a rough, unpolished sound. It was the sound of freedom. I drove out of the city. I left the skyscrapers and the noise behind. I watched the Pembroke Tower fade in the rearview mirror until it was just a speck. When I reached the gravel road leading to my cabin, I rolled down the windows. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. My dogs heard the truck coming. They ran to the gate tails, wagging, barking with pure, unadulterated joy. They did not care about my bank account. They did not care about my reputation. They just loved me because I was home. I parked the truck. I stepped out onto the dirt. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the clean air. I walked into the cabin. It was exactly as I had left it. The wood stove was cold. The coffee cup was still on the table. I started a fire. I watched the flames dance. I sat down in my armchair. I was alone, but I was not lonely. I had reclaimed my life. I had reclaimed my family. But as I sat there watching the fire, a thought drifted into my mind, a habit of a lifetime of vigilance. Leland and Bryce were in prison. Their empire was destroyed. But hate is a powerful fuel. And prison is a place where men have nothing to do but think and plan. I remembered the look in Bryce's eyes as the van doors closed. It was pleading, yes. But underneath the pleading there was something else. A flicker of madness. And Leland, a man who would sell his own son, would do anything to survive. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my secure phone. I did not turn it off. I placed it on the table next to me. Peace had returned. The birds were singing. The wind was whispering in the trees. But I knew better than anyone that peace is just the intermission between wars. I closed my eyes and let myself rest. But I kept one ear open, always. Because the wolf does not sleep. He waits. And if the shadows ever moved again, if the darkness ever tried to creep back toward my daughter, I would be ready. I was Ulysses Mercer, and I was always watching. The snow fell gently outside the window, covering the scars of the earth in a blanket of white. It was exactly 1 year to the day since I had walked out of the Pembroke mansion into the cold night. But the air inside my cabin today did not smell of judgment or expensive perfume. It smelled of sage and roasted garlic, and the deep, rich aroma of a turkey that had been cooking for 6 hours. I stood by the oven in my flannel shirt. I opened the door and basted the bird. The skin was golden brown and crispy. It was perfect. I smiled to myself. Last year, Leland had called my daughter's cooking peasant food. He had poked at it with disdain. Today, there were no critics in my kitchen. There was only family. Gabrielle was standing at the counter chopping vegetables for the salad. She was humming. It was a sound I had not heard in a decade. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair was loose. She looked younger. The lines of stress that had etched themselves around her eyes during her marriage to Bryce were gone, smoothed away by 12 months of freedom and purpose. She looked up and caught me watching her. "Is it ready, Daddy?" she asked. "I think it is," I said. "I think it is the best one we have ever made." She put down the knife and walked over to me. She wrapped her arms around my waist and rested her head on my shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "For the turkey," I asked, teasing her. "For everything," she said. "For giving me this. For giving me peace." I kissed the top of her head. "Peace is not given, Gabrielle," I said. "It is built. You built this. I just cleared the ground." The sound of tires crunching on gravel outside announced the arrival of our guests. My dogs barked happily, running to the door. These were not intruders. These were pack members. I opened the door. Chief Harrison stood there holding a crate of apple cider. He was not wearing his uniform. He was wearing a thick wool sweater that made him look less like a lawman and more like a lumberjack. Beside him was Sloane. For the first time since I had known her, she was not wearing a black suit. She was wearing a red dress. It was a shocking splash of color. She held a pie box in her hands. "Permission to enter," Colonel Harrison boomed, his voice full of warmth. "Permission granted, Sergeant," I said, shaking his hand. "But leave the rank at the door. Today I am just Ulysses." Sloane walked in and handed me the pie. "It is pecan," she said. "I made it myself. And before you ask, sir, I did not use a recipe algorithm. I used my grandmother's cookbook." I laughed. It was a good sound, a deep belly laugh that shook the rafters. "Come in," I said. "The food is hot and the house is warm." We gathered around the table. It was not a long mahogany table like the one at the Pembroke estate. It was a round oak table I had built with my own hands 30 years ago. It was scratched and worn, but it was solid. There were no assigned seats. There was no head of the table. We sat in a circle, equals in every way. I brought the turkey out and placed it in the center. The steam rose up, carrying the scent of rosemary. Gabrielle poured the wine. It was a bottle of Pinot Noir. Not the most expensive bottle in the world, but a good, honest wine. She filled Harrison's glass. She filled Sloane's glass. She filled mine. I watched her hand. It was steady. 1 year ago, a hand just like this had held a glass just like this. and that hand had turned a celebration into a war. Leland had used wine as a weapon to humiliate us. He had tried to wash away our dignity with red liquid. I picked up my glass. The ruby liquid caught the light of the fire. Everyone stopped talking. They looked at me. I looked at Harrison, the man who had helped me arrest the corruption. I looked at Sloane, the woman who had dismantled the financial empire of our enemies. I looked at Gabrielle, the daughter who had risen from the ashes. To family, I said. To family, they repeated in unison. And then I added the words that had been burning in my heart. And to the people who know that you cannot buy loyalty, I said. You can only earn it. We drank. No one threw the wine, no one sneered, no one checked their watch. Harrison tore into a drumstick and groaned with pleasure. "My God, Ulysses," he said. "If you ever open a restaurant, let me know. I will quit the force tomorrow." Sloane laughed. It was a rare, beautiful sound. She was relaxed. The sharp edges of the operative were gone, replaced by the warmth of a friend. We ate for hours. We told stories. We did not talk about business. We did not talk about the Pembroke trial or the prison sentences that had been handed down last month. We did not talk about Bryce weeping in the courtroom or Leland trying to bribe the jury. Those ghosts were gone. They were locked away in concrete boxes where they belonged. We talked about the future. Gabrielle talked about the new community center the foundation was building. Harrison talked about his grandson's baseball team. Sloane talked about taking a vacation for the first time in 10 years. I sat back and watched them. My heart felt full. It was a different kind of fullness than the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. It was the fullness of a garden that has finally bloomed after a long, hard winter. As the evening wound down and the fire burned low into glowing embers, I excused myself. I walked to the mantel above the fireplace. There was a photograph there in a simple silver frame. It was Esther. She was laughing in the photo, her hair caught in the wind. It was taken on this very property 40 years ago, before we had money, before we had power. I touched the glass. "We did it, Essie," I whispered. "The girl is safe. The wolves are gone." I felt a presence beside me. It was Gabrielle. She put her hand on my back. "She would have loved tonight," she said softly. "She is here," I said, tapping my chest. "She is always here." I turned away from the photo and walked to my desk in the corner of the room. Sitting there on the polished wood was the black satellite phone. The brick, the device that connected me to the shadow world, the device I had used to bring down an empire, the device that Sloane called the hand of God. It was blinking with a slow, steady green light indicating it was on standby, waiting for the next crisis, waiting for the next war. I looked at it. For a year I had kept it close. I had slept with one eye open, waiting for retaliation, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But the Pembrokes were gone. Their assets were sold. Their allies had abandoned them. And more importantly, I had changed. I looked back at the table. Harrison was showing Sloane a magic trick with a coin. They were laughing. I did not need to be the colonel anymore. I did not need to be the fixer. I picked up the phone. It felt heavy in my hand. Heavy with secrets. Heavy with the weight of what I was capable of. I pressed the power button on the side. A prompt appeared on the small screen. Confirm shutdown. I looked at my daughter. She was happy. She was strong. She did not need a bodyguard. She needed a father. I pressed yes. The green light flickered once and went out. The screen went black. The link was severed. I opened the desk drawer and placed the phone inside. I pushed the drawer shut. Click. It was over. I turned back to the room. "Who wants coffee?" I asked. "I do," Sloane said, raising her hand. "But only if I can have another piece of pie." I smiled. I walked back to the table. I sat down in my chair. I was just a man in a flannel shirt sitting with his family in a cabin in the woods. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. I am Ulysses Mercer. And I am finally home. This experience taught me that true power does not roar. It whispers. I learned that respect is not an inheritance you receive. It is a debt you pay every single day with your actions. Leland and Bryce believed that their wealth made them untouchable, but they forgot that the most dangerous man in the room is often the one who has nothing left to prove. True family is not defined by bloodlines or last names. It is defined by who stays with you when the lights go out and the heating dies. It is defined by loyalty, honor, and the courage to stand for what is right, even when you are standing alone. Never mistake silence for weakness, because sometimes silence is just the sound of a trap being set. If you enjoyed watching the Pembrokes get exactly what they deserved, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments below, have you ever been underestimated by people who thought they were better than you? I would love to hear your story. Until next time, stay strong, stay humble, and always watch your six.